Hello, hi, and welcome to part 3 video of my fully comprehensive rent-to-rent training. Completely free of charge, completely uncovered, completely released, unleashed, how you want to name it, how you want to frame it. Look, the reality is this: you've gone this far. I'm assuming that you've seen part 1 video and part 2 video. Part 3 video will be mainly about serviced accommodation and rent-to-rent properties. So if you look at starting your AirBNB business, you don't want to purchase properties, but you do want to manage and make money on service accommodation properties, then this video will be great for you. However, if you haven't seen part 1 video and you haven't seen part 2 video, then I strongly suggest for you to save this video, add it to your bookmarks, stop at this point, go to the video number 1, because this is where I cover everything from the very basic level and really scaling up and getting your information more advanced. Then video 2 is all about HMOs. It's a very strong and good strategy, and even if you're not thinking about HMOs in the first place, I still want you to watch this video because it will also allow you to change your thinking and add some bullets to your arsenal before you actually go into service accommodation. On top of that, I've already gave you the opportunity to join our 30-day challenge. It's something that I created for people who are really serious about making money fast in rent-to-rent. I'm super confident that with the knowledge that you acquire from those videos, plus the 30-day challenge, within 30 days, you're going to be able to secure 8 pre-qualified viewings every single month. That should give you at least 1 property a month. If you don't know why it's 8, I've already done all the maths in video number 1. I was already inviting you to join the challenge in video number 2, but right now I want you to go to the description. There is a link to join the challenge. There is a very small fee, and it's nowhere near all the fees that people are charging right now for big courses and big programs. Don't worry, it's only a very small fee to join. But for you, the main thing is to remember, if you're serious and you really want to start making money in rent-to-rent, it all starts with booking high quality pre-qualified viewings, and if you do 8 of them in a single month, you will see exponential value and exponential growth of your rent-to-rent business, even if you are looking to sell those deals. But I would strongly recommend for you to keep them, because we don't want to get rid of the assets, we want to keep them in our own portfolio. Right, another thing I wanted to tell you is that if you're already getting to this video, to part 3, and providing you watch video number 1 and video number 2, then you're already very advanced with your skills and the information you've got about rent-to-rent. The one thing I want to give to you as a gift, completely free of charge as well, is I want you to go through my checklist. The checklist is something I created for those people who know they want to make money in rent-to-rent, and in simple 10 steps formula, we can establish if we are ready to start making money in rent-to-rent, or there is still something missing in the whole puzzle. It's a 1-sheet document, so I want you to, again, go to the description. You'll find there is the Freedom Mastery checklist. Click on that, download it, and on top of the 1 page that you're going to download and ideally print, I want you to attach another page to it, so you take your own notes, because there will be some questions around specific points in your rent-to-rent business, based on which you're going to be able to determine if you're ready to start making money or not yet ready. One thing to clarify, the very final question there talks about branding, internal and external. I want to give you a little bit of understanding behind that question. You see, when it comes to branding, I perceive branding in 2 ways. Internal branding is something how we see ourselves. It's our confidence and our language patterns. It's what we think about ourselves and how we perceive ourselves. So in the first place, we need to focus on internal branding. We need to focus on our confidence, how we talk to people. We need to practice our language patterns. This is our internal branding. We understand our business, we understand our features, our benefits. That all is part of your internal branding. Once you're happy with your internal branding and you know what you're going to be talking about and you understand your business, then we're going to go into external branding. And external branding is something how other people perceive you and your business. So it could be, for example, your business card, or it could be your website. This is external branding because these things are seen by people from the external world. It's not how you perceive yourself, but it's how other people see you. This is how we class branding, internal and external. Other than that, you're going to be absolutely fine to go through that check sheet. So go to the description, pause that video right now, download the check sheet, fill it out, and you will see black and white how ready you are in order to start making profits from rent to rent, because that's what it's all about, making profits in rent to rent. Okay, I think we've covered all the basics. As I said, this video will be predominantly focusing on service accommodation strategy. So I hope you're getting excited because I've got tons of information for you. So let's crack on with it and let's do some damage together. All right, so in the first place, it makes a logical sense that we go through it one more time to explain what service accommodation actually means. Rent to service accommodation is the strategy, again, where we don't have to buy the asset. We will rent the asset from the landlord, and then we will turn that asset into a property that we typically will be renting out on short-term stays. And I want you to imagine this property as something that somebody can go on booking.com or Airbnb, find your property there, and they can book that property, for example, for a week or for a month or for 6 months, for example. Okay. Although some stays can be for a longer period of time, it will still be perceived as short stay because there is that flexibility for people who are looking for property without signing any AST contracts. They don't have any strings attached. They just want to rent the property out for like 7 days. And it's kind of like a mini hotel. The beauty about service accommodation strategy is that everything can be service accommodation. You can have a room that you can rent out as service accommodation. You can have a 1-bedroom property that could work very, very well as service accommodation. You can also have a big house, like for example, 8-bedroom property that can also work very, very well as service accommodation. So the scope of making money in service accommodation is absolutely huge. And there is so much that goes into this strategy. But at the end of it, there is also a huge reward, because if service accommodation is done rightly, it can make you not even hundreds, but often thousands of pounds every single month. And again, I remind you that it's actually on a property that you don't even own. So now that we've got clarified what service accommodation stands for, now I want you to think about who is going to be your target guest. Because service accommodation requires a lot of targeting, you see. Depending on where you are, where you want to have your properties, you also need to understand who will be staying at your property, whether that's going to be a couple, whether that's going to be a family, whether that's going to be a contractor, or whether that will be your relocators. These questions matter a lot. And a lot of those questions will be applicable to the area where you want to build your portfolio. For example, if you've got a seaside property, typically there will be people coming to visit for holiday, for short stays, of course, to enjoy the time. It will be mainly for tourists visiting the area if they want to visit the coastline, right? But on the flip side, if we're in the city center of a big city, for example, Manchester or Leeds, right? And there is a lot of work going on and there are a lot of contractors, then perhaps you need to think that your ideal client would be a contractor. Depending on who will be your target client, who will be your target guest, will very much tell you what type of property you need to acquire in order to accommodate those people, because those people will be paying you a lot for accommodation. Taking one step forward from this question is, where do they want to stay? Exactly, because if that's about family who is coming to visit the coastline, then they are not looking for a big mansion, of course, right? They are looking for something, maybe 1 bedroom, maybe 2 bedrooms, because they don't want to pay over the odds unless they want to have certain luxuries. On the flip side, if you're aiming at contractors somewhere close to city centre or maybe industrial park, then understand how big the party is. If there are a lot of contractors in the area, then perhaps you want to have a bigger property, ideally with separate rooms, separate beds, separate bathrooms, ideally. Have a think about who your target client is and what type of property will serve them best. Once you understand those questions, it gives you a clear answer on what type of property you're looking in your ideal patch. And at this point, I want you to stay completely open-minded about service accommodation, because different type of properties can work very, very well in this booming market. Now that we're speaking about the right type of property, who's going to be our target guest, who's going to be staying there, we also need to find our own place and our own position in your local marketplace. In other words, think about the service accommodation standard. Would you think that service accommodation can be done at any property where you have very low standard, or perhaps it should be a higher standard, and this will attract the higher quality guests and people who really want to stay at that type of property? I want you to think about service accommodation as a kind of like a hotel or mini hotel, if you like. When you go to a hotel, there is always a certain standard that has to be presented in front of you in order for you to book this property. If you saw an advert, if you saw some pictures of a property or a hotel room that is not up to scratch, that does not look very nice, there are some stains on the walls, there is a lot of mold in the ensuite or in the bathroom, would you go for this room? I presume right now you're answering to yourself, not really. And service accommodation works exactly the same way. You want to attract people to your property. You want to have a lot of people coming in, visiting your website, you visiting your OTAs, and they really want to have the reason in order to book your place, because then it means high occupancy to you, higher nightly rates, and of course, higher profits. That's what we want to do. So I want to ask you a very straightforward question. On the left hand side, we've got one of my service accommodation property, and you can choose between that, or maybe you want to choose that. The choice is yours. Which one would you go for? I suppose the answer is obvious. You certainly don't want to book a trashed place or a very old furnitured property. And on the left hand side, obviously you've got everything nice, modern, clean, and that's what we want. So that's what I want you to start sort of positioning in your mind, that your service accommodation properties have to have a certain standard. I'm not saying that every property needs to have a jacuzzi and whatever you might think about. It's all about making sure that your property will attract people. You will have nice decor, nice staging, and you will not cut corners, because when you start cutting corners, then you might end up with not a great result. And trust me, dressing up and staging property to relatively high standard, it's not even that expensive if you think about it. If you want to save some money, you can be more creative with sourcing furniture or sourcing decorations. You really don't have to buy everything brand new as well. It can be secondhand if you want to save a little bit more money. But a prime example of setting up a decent service accommodation apartment was with my client, and he found a property in London. When he was looking for furniture, he sourced a lot of furniture from people who wanted to get rid of it or just really sold it for fraction of the original price. And really, I don't want to put in any numbers, but it didn't cost him a lot to stage and dress this one bedroom apartment, which is now making him on average between 1,200 and 1,500 pounds every single month. So be creative, put in a little bit of effort and a little bit of time, but I want you to start thinking about service accommodation as a hotel or mini hotel standard, because when you start thinking about this as this kind of level of standard, you will attract more people. People will be more willing to stay in your place. You will get better reviews as well, which in essence will attract even more people in the future. So this is like a chain, and every single link makes a huge difference. It matters a lot, and it all starts with your standards. So be prepared that when you start and set your service accommodation apartment or property, be prepared that you're going to set it to a good standard, to high quality, and trust me, people will come, because there's going to be a lot of competition in the area, but they will choose your property over others, because not only your standard will be great, but you will also capture it in a very nice and professional way on different photographs, like on these ones, for example. All right, so now the question is whether you watched video number 1 or not. Because if you didn't, you have to pause right now. You need to go back to video number 1, because a lot of pre-work has been covered in video number 1. If you did watch it, that's great, because you already know how to find properties. And when it comes to criteria, now you know kind of what type of property you're going to be looking for if you want to set it up for service accommodation project. Now I want to elaborate and expand on what do we actually do when we book the appointment, when we book the viewing. What happens next and how do we need to act? What do we need to do at the actual viewing? Up to this point, I haven't done any heavy due diligence on the property because it's pointless without the going and checking the property at the actual viewing, right? So now let's say that standing in front of that property and you don't know what to do next. You haven't done a viewing before in the past. If you have, that's great. Let's just cover it together. In the first place, what I tend to do, I just tend to look at the property from outside in general, just to see the overall condition. I check the roof line, check the condition of the roof tiles, I check the condition of the windows and the front door. Obviously, if there is a front garden, I also rate the front garden and its condition as well. From that point, I just try to memorize the condition of the front of the property because remember, we still haven't asked permission to the landlord or to the letting agent if we are technically allowed to take photos or record a video. But now that you understand the front of the property, you have established the condition of it. You knock the door if there is nobody waiting for you, and then somebody's coming out to you, they greet you. That's absolutely brilliant. So at that point, you'll just say hello, shake hands. Don't be afraid to shake people's hands. And also, don't be afraid to grab somebody's hand and squeeze it properly. You see, people, when they meet in the first few seconds, they make a lot of judgment. And all of this is happening subconsciously. Your handshake plays a significant role in somebody's perception of you and your confidence. If you want other people to perceive you as this confident person, one of the things that you really have to learn how to do properly is to shake hands when you first meet them. So when you meet somebody, just shake their hand. Don't be afraid to properly squeeze it. Look in their eyes whilst you do it, because whilst you look in their eyes, it just establishes and creates this connection with other person. That's very important. At that point, you might ask the question whether you're okay to take photos or ideally record a video of the property. If they say yes, that's great. What you can do, you can just carry on with the viewing from the beginning of the property, set recording, go around with your camera whilst you watching rooms and you're having conversation with either the landlord or a letting agent. So typically, you might ask them if they could just take you around. It will make them feel more like it's their property, right? It's their project. That's great. And you will just be looking around for different floors and things that are congruent with the advert and perhaps are not congruent with the advert. What we're looking for is we're looking to establish the condition of the property. We've seen some photos, so we created a bit of a picture in our mind about how much this property would require in order to set it to the standard that we want to have it. Perhaps at the beginning we thought that apart from painting some walls and putting some staging in place, this will be okay. But now that you're in the property, you can physically see if that's going to be enough, or maybe there is something more that requires your attention. For example, on the photos, you couldn't see some stains on the wall, or perhaps there are some ugly pipes just running along the wall, and that will need hiding, for example. Now it's your time to look with your own eye if the property is up to scratch or not. If it isn't, capture that on the video, but in all fairness, do not bring any kind of sheets like viewing sheets or any viewing aids with you, because all you need right now at this point is your camera. You're recording this with your phone. That's all you need. I've seen people many times showing up at the viewings with some sheets, with some notepads, and to be honest with you, it looks absolute childish. It looks amateur. If you want to be professional, just ask if you can take some photos, ask if you can record a video, and guess what? After the viewing, you can always go back to it and you've got everything black and white. You've got all the evidence. You don't need to take notes as you go along because it will take forever. You will always miss something and you will never have any backup, any recording from the property in case you want to determine if that was the case or not. So please, at that point, do me a favor. Do never show up at properties with some form of viewing sheets because that just looks absolute amateur and some people will not take you seriously. Okay? Next, we try to establish what's the condition of the pipework? When we are in the kitchen, when we're in the bathroom, just try to see if there are any leaks. Don't be afraid to open up the tap and see if nothing is leaking. Okay, that could be in the kitchen, it could be in the bathroom. Next, what I tend to check is the boiler. So I ask where the boiler is, and they'll show me where the boiler is, right? If it's a big water tank, of course, make sure you take a photo of that. Or if it's a combi boiler, just take a video of the boiler, because you will see if it's an older type of boiler, it might cause you problems. And you have to take this into account as well. If it's a nice brand new boiler, it's been serviced every single year, then you don't have to worry about this too much. But you've checked it, so you can take that in your virtual list in your mind, right? Typically, systems with big water tank cause some issues. I know, because I've got one property with this system. The system is not great. And I also used to live in one property like that. It didn't work absolutely flawless. We had some issues. We had to contact some plumbers and heating engineers every now and again just to come and sort it out. And I know for a fact that combi boiler systems are much more reliable. They cause less problems. They are not as complicated. And for this reason, if you've got a big water tank at the property, then this is something that you also have to address and take into account, that you might have some problems moving forward. Now, there is obviously a difference between an older system and new systems, because in HMO, for example, it's hard to imagine if you've got 5 or 6 en suites and you've got a combi boiler. If somebody is taking a shower and then all of a sudden another person is going to take a shower, one combi boiler could not be enough to provide hot water for 2 showers. For this reason, in HMOs, a typical installation is an installation with big water tank. But if this is well looked after, and you can see that this is a new system, you will not have issues and problems. And remember, especially in service accommodation, where people can be more fussy than typical guest or tenant, then remember that people will be picking up on that very quickly, and that will have a negative impact on your reviews. So you want to make sure that you're on top of those things. Next, check the furniture. So if the property is furnished, make sure that the furniture is compliant to fire and safety regulations. And nowadays, the furniture that is released, of course, it's got the right tags. You make sure that it's fire resistant and so on. Because in service accommodation, right now, we also have some rules and regulation kicking in. So we need to make sure that when we actually do our risk assessment, we can say that the furniture provided at that property is safe, it's got the right tags, and it's fire resistant, essentially. When you also check the condition of it. Don't be afraid to move it to see if perhaps nothing is wobbling, nothing is a little bit worn. And if it isn't, that's great. You save yourself a lot of money. But if it is, then you might need to invest some money, but in removing that furniture and also bringing in the new stuff that you're planning to install in the property. Another thing that I would check at the viewing is the heating system. Is it electrical heating? Is it gas heating? If it is gas, then how many radiators does the property have? Where is the thermostat? Can you control the heating temperature? Can you turn it off if you want to? You see, a lot of properties have different systems, and you have to put yourself in a position that you manage this property, and whether this will cause you problems, or the thermostat or the system will actually help you to manage the property. Nowadays, I love to have properties with smart thermostats that are connecting via Wi-Fi, so you can control that from your phone. I really love those systems, because even if there is a guest, for example, staying at your property and saying that, heating, for example, does not work, then you can very quickly go to your app and you can see if it's working or not. And if it isn't, you can very quickly address it. Perhaps it just needs a restart, and that will resolve all the issue. On top of that, try to find any signs of mold. You see, mold can be also a significant problem at properties, especially when it comes to service accommodation, because people hate mold naturally. When they walk into the property and there will be natural signs of mold, very quickly people will reflect that in their reviews. So if there is some mold, of course, if it's just a typical silicone mold, then you can very quickly replace it and the cost is very, very minimal. However, if you've got damp on walls, that could be a significant problem. And I learned this lesson hard from one of my projects, where there was an issue with 2 walls in the property. A guest turned up, there was a lovely 1-month booking, and the guest turned up and they said that they cannot stay in the property because the entire wall or two walls were infected with a very strange type of mold and they left the property. So I lost the booking. For a month, we had to resolve that problem. So we lost plenty of money because of that. So when you see that there is a problem with damp, then you have to address it with the letting agent or the landlord straight away. Because if you don't, this will bite you right in the backside in the nearest future. Trust me on that. If there is a rear garden, then also try to see if there is a low maintenance space or you will have to look after it a lot, because the bigger gardens and the more green, obviously it needs maintenance. So whether that would be yourself doing it, which is something I wouldn't recommend, you would probably have to send a landscaper or a gardener to go to the place like once a month to just keep the good standard, keep it clean, keep it fresh. But ideally it will be a low maintenance garden. So something with some slabs, something with some concrete, and not a lot of grass. Because if it's low maintenance, that's great. You don't have to spend a lot of time on it, or you don't have to spend money on expensive landscapers and gardeners, and you can still maintain that nice, fresh, good look of the rear garden space. Typically, it's good to have a garden space because some guests like to have external space. That is the difference between the hotel room, for example, and a nice Airbnb property. So if there is a rear garden space or front garden space, at least, that's a great benefit to the property. It's not a must though. And also take a note of the parking. So whilst you're at the viewing, try to find out from the letting agent or from the landlord as much as you can about the property. Ask some questions, ask about the history of it, also about the parking space. Is there an allocated parking? Does it require parking permit? How much is the parking permit if there is a parking permit? What qualifies the parking permit? So those questions you can ask whilst you're there and then. And remember, because you're technically recording a video, all your answers are recorded. So not only you can have the visuals about the property, but you can also reflect back on what the letting agent or the landlord told you about this specific property. I don't want to put too much on you, but viewing is actually something I enjoy a lot, but it's also a place where you're actually working, right? On top of learning more about the property, on top of finding out, taking photos, recording, finding different flaws and problems, your role is also to establish a very good connection with your letting agent or a landlord. So don't just go to the property and ask very strict questions like, what's the parking situation? What's the boiler situation? Where's the heating system? Show me this, show me that. No, you are going there as a friendly person who's looking to build a long lasting relationship. So don't be afraid to have a casual conversation. Don't be afraid to joke around a little bit, because when you're confident and you have this natural, easygoing atmosphere going on around you, then people will be more attracted to you. So on top of learning more about the property, finding out more about it, finding some issues and flaws if there are any, you're also looking to build a great relationship. From that great relationship, you might have a lot of properties coming and you will be making a lot of profit from it. So make sure that you build decent rapport at the viewing. This is your chance, this is your moment to build that one-to-one connection with your ideal landlord, with this ideal letting agent. I hope you're taking notes. I hope you're going back to the worksheet that you've printed from the previous videos. If you haven't done it yet, then go straight to the description. There is still a link. Download the worksheet, print it out, and make sure that you're filling out that information as we go along. Because when you are taking those notes, you will be naturally recording a lot more information rather than just empty listening that does not leave a lot of information with you at the end of the video. One last thing I would suggest to do at the viewing is to ask two critical questions when it comes to service accommodation strategy. Question number one is ask if this property has got a mortgage on it, and typically there will be a mortgage, right? In which case, you need to ask if the mortgage conditions allow service accommodation business model. You see, very often lenders these days allow to do this type of business model, but if you haven't asked for that and the landlord didn't check it, then it can come back, and in the future it can be a really, really nasty process to get the property back from the market. There could be some penalties going to the landlord. You could be responsible for some penalties, and of course insurance won't be covering them because you have not done your checks right. So in the first place, ask the landlord or ask the letting agent if mortgage conditions are okay with what is it that you actually do. And you don't have to tell them exactly what you do because you already told them at the conversation, right? We are only booking pre-qualified viewings, so technically they should have that information at hand. They should already have checked the mortgage conditions, but your role and your responsibility is to make sure that they have, and if they haven't, mention that to them, let them take a note of it, let them ask the mortgage provider if they meet those requirements. Second thing you need to ask about is only for leasehold properties. So typically flats, apartments, those properties will be leasehold properties, and for that reason they will have something called a head of lease. So whoever owns the ground, whoever owns the building, they will also have set of rules and regulations associated to this building. So it is the landlord's responsibility again to check if the head of lease allows service accommodation model, short-term stays model. If it does, that's great. Sometimes it doesn't. Unfortunately, this is something that happens, and if it does happen, even though you're willing to go ahead with the deal and the landlord is willing to go ahead with the deal, if the head of lease does not allow that, unfortunately, there is not much you can do about it, and you just have to move on to the next project. My favorite practice after the viewing is to sit down at the cafe or go back to the office, watch my photos or watch my video again, and take notes of everything that I saw at the property that I didn't like, or maybe things that I missed, and take note from direct from the video. When you do that, you create yourself a list of arguments under which you can negotiate a better deal. For example, if there was a little bit of staining on the walls, you can go back to them and say, we will have to paint the property and we're happy to do it, but for that, we would like to negotiate better terms and conditions. In video 1, I told you how to negotiate a better deal and what it actually is that you can negotiate on in order to get yourself better terms and conditions of the actual deal. So now your role is to launch as many bullets to your arsenal in order to attack and in order to get the best deal possible for you. Of course, don't pull their leg too much. You don't want to annoy them. You don't want to stress them because they'll naturally just go to another person and they will just rent out the property to somebody else. You have to be reasonable, but at the same time, you have to negotiate better conditions because if, for example, to repaint the property will take you 2, 3, 4 days, for example, then ideally you want to have this time without you paying rent to that property because all of a sudden landlord will benefit from a nicely refreshed property, and then of course it's going to be your time and your effort to fix this issue, so everybody's winning. You make sure that you just flag it up and you raise your voice about it because as in life, if you don't ask, you don't get. So now, as you can probably guess, I want you to book as many viewings as possible, go out and practice. Of course, I'm joking. Right now, we're still building our knowledge, right? But that's ultimately what it's going to come down to. When you start doing viewings, rent-to-rent viewings, remember that in the first place, you pre-qualified them. So you're already going to the property with a certain intention and they already know what your intentions are. So you're already in a much better position comparing yourself to a traditional type of viewing, right? Secondly, you're taking recordings and you're asking the right questions and you're building the right rapport with those people. So you're setting yourself up for a win. And don't be afraid because your first viewing will be probably stressful. It will probably go wrong. You will probably forget doing something, which is absolutely fine. But then the second time you're going to go, you will enjoy the process more because you're going to be less stressed and you're going to enjoy the conversation with them. So don't be afraid. Do as many of them as possible when you feel that you're ready to go out on streets and really make an impact on your local marketplace. Now you've got all the information required from the property. You've been there, you physically saw that, and you have listed all the issues that potentially can give you some power and some force in order to negotiate a better deal for you. Now, that's the time for you to carry out a thorough due diligence on that property. And now we're going to be covering how to do it properly on one property that we're going to randomly find on Rightmove or Zoopla. Okay, sweet. So you remember when I said that after the viewing, I love to go to a cafe or go back to the office and go through all the numbers, all the figures, all the facts, so I can really just get everything together and I can come up with a good offer that works for me and hopefully works for the landlord. So let's say I'm on my way to my favorite cafe and I'm sitting down. What do I do next? This module will be all about the due diligence and how would I actually check if the deal makes sense. And at this point, if you're asking yourself a question, how did I even find a deal or how did I even contact somebody? Then it means that you haven't watched video 2 accurately. So I suggest that right now you just pause this video, add this to your bookmarks so you can find it back, and then go back to video number 2, in which I'm explaining how to find those leads and how to really book a pre-qualified viewing. Once you do it, come back to this video and then you'll see what due diligence I actually do on a particular property. I want to highlight one particular thing, which is the order in which I actually take action. Because a lot of starters, a lot of beginners, when they start, they put in a lot of effort, a lot of time into digging deeper into the property just based on some photos and locations and so on and so on. Which, in all fairness, it's not a bad idea. The problem is that you're going to find yourself wasting a lot of your precious time. Instead, you can maximize that time on contacting as many people as possible, finding as many leads, booking as many pre-qualified viewings, and then going to properties, taking your own video and photos, and then with what you've got, you can put all the facts together and submit a nice juicy offer. That's how I tend to work. That's how I teach my students as well. And that's what I want you to do, because this way you will maximize your time and maximize your efficiency. So let's jump now on the web browser. Let's find a random property and then let's do a due diligence, providing and assuming that I've actually seen that property and I'm right now at my favorite cafe just doing a little bit of due diligence. So let's jump on Google now. From Google, we're going to go to a platform that I covered in a previous video, but I haven't yet opened it. So we're going to cover On the Market. So I'm going to go on themarket.co.uk. Remember that we have to go to rental properties. We're not buying, we're renting. So we're going to type in, for example, we've got London, Bristol, Stoke. Let's go Stoke-on-Trent. Why not? There we go. So we've got all properties listed within Stoke-on-Trent. Here we can set our radius, and for this exercise, I'm not going to open up the radius. We're going to have plenty to go at anyway. We're going to also determine price per calendar month. I would say anything from 800 plus, because obviously we want to just bypass all the rooms. And there is also another filter I want to show you in order to do it as well. So we're going to say apply. Number of bedrooms, because we're looking specifically for service accommodation, I would say anything from 1 bedroom, maybe to 3 or 4. Let's say I'm going to stick to 4 for that for now. We will see. In Stoke-on-Trent, I don't presume there's going to be a lot of tourism going on. I think it's going to be mainly for contractors, relocators, business people coming into the area. Typically, they wouldn't stay in larger properties than 3 or 4 bedrooms. But of course, this could be a wrong assumption. That's why I'll just do it for now. But ideally, if you know the area very well, then that's going to be your knowledge and expertise about this area to understand what type of property would suit your ideal client best. So I'm just going to say 4 bedrooms, and then I'm going to click more filters, and then we can just say don't show shared accommodation. So in here, we're not going to be viewing at house shares, HMOs, right? Because we're looking for the entire properties ideally. So here we're going to be focusing predominantly on flats, apartments, houses that will work very well for our service accommodation, right? So we've got some properties. Okay, so that one is a terrace house, 3 beds, 1 bath, and that one has got 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. So okay, I'm going to go with this one now. Reason being is that I've got a property with 2 bathrooms and 1 bathroom. And I know that the more bathrooms the property has, the better it will actually attract people, especially if there are some contractors, for example, coming in. Imagine there is only one bathroom for 5 people versus um, two bathrooms with 5 people in the property. They can then obviously utilize that property better. People naturally like if there are more bathrooms, or at least there is ensuite and a bathroom. And now remember, I'm coming back from this viewing. I just watched that property. I viewed this property. I've got a lovely video now. And here is what I'm going to do first. And I've got this ad presented in front of me. Now I've got a complete different view and completely different picture about this property because I physically saw that. I've been there. I can now go back to my video on my phone and watch this video just to refresh and memorize things as I was walking across the property. Now is the time to put in more effort into this due diligence. So first, I want to go and check Google Streets. If you know the area, if this is where you live, this is your city, this is your town, then that's great because you already know the area. But presuming that you know nothing or very little about this area, and I don't know anything about Stoke-on-Trent, then I want to really see in the first place what the streets look like. Ideally, when I was at the viewing, I wouldn't just go there to watch the property. I would also go to experience the streets, the local streets, like the next street, the next road, to understand the area a little bit. Because when you watch those properties around, you will naturally get a feel whether this area is a purely residential area, whether it's full of HMOs, whether it's maybe like post council area, or you've got a lot of council properties there. You are building this picture around this area based on everything that you see. But on top of that, remember that we've got a fantastic tool called Google Streets, right? So we have Camellia Street, Stoke-on-Trent. Now I'm going to go to Google Maps. I'm going to type in Camellia Close and see what it comes up with. Okay, that's great. Let me just move this. And we've got our little yellow guy. It allows us to essentially go into the street view, right? So, okay, it took just a fraction of a second just to establish and determine that this area is just residential area, essentially, isn't it? So we know it wouldn't be for students, or predominantly wouldn't be for students. It would be mainly for people like contractors, relocators, and ideally for longer term stays as well, right? So I'm now building this picture. Of course, as I mentioned, if I went to that area and I really viewed it, then I would get that feel just from driving by. If I lived there, then I would know that because I know the area. And you can see we've got a lot of properties like terrace, semi. I think there were some detached properties as well. So that essentially gives me a full understanding we are in a residential area. Okay. Think it could have been this property or thereabout. Maybe this one. Let me go back to our advert. It's end of terrace house, isn't it? Terrace house, yes. Okay, never mind. It's going to be there or thereabout, but now I understand that we are in a residential area. I cannot see anything wrong happening there, to be honest with you. And then we know it's going to be predominantly for our long-term stays, hopefully for contractors if there are some works in the area. Now, let's go back to the overall view on our Google Maps. Because now, what I want to do is I want to understand what's happening in the area. If you remember, we're looking for those amenities like shopping centers, city centers, train stations, museums, cathedrals, hospitals. So let's see what's happening in the vicinity of this property. So as I zoom out, first thing that comes to my eyes, we can see there is Royal Stoke University Hospital. So it's not far away. We can see it's within a nice walking distance, right? Also on the left hand side, we've got Newcastle under Lyme. which indicates there is a lot of commercial activity because we've got those yellow patches, right? So Capella Lounge, the Jug. Okay, there are some bars. There's a cinema. That's great. There are some things pretty close to the property, so something is happening. Even closer, you've got a street with some restaurants, with some bars, and it's like as you go along the street, there is something going on, which is nice. It's always a bonus. Okay, not far away there is a park, which is also a bonus, right? And I want to pay attention on one thing. We are very, very close to A500. So you can definitely say it's one of the main streets in Stoke. In fact, it's running all the way up through Stoke-on-Trent and it takes people up north. Then it turns west to Crewe. Okay, great. So as you can see, we're very, very close to one of the main streets. So if somebody was looking to get just outside or they're going anywhere, of course, it's very beneficial if one of the main streets is actually close by. And then we can see on the other side, we've got the Waterworld, we've got Morrison's, Marks and Spencer, we've got Cineworld, Hanley. So as you can see, we are in the area with a lot going on. Not directly close. We can see that this area is residential and nobody would expect that like 2-minute walk from it, all of a sudden you're going to have a big shopping center and all the different amenities. But you can see that, there is train station here as well, hospital. So you can tell that there are some areas of interest like this one, hospital, you've got train station, you've got Hanley here, and we are like in a center of it, which position wise it will obviously help for somebody depending on what they want. If they want to have a little bit of entertainment, whether they want a little bit of cinema, universities down south. So as you can see, we're in a good position that wherever we move, we're going to find something different. It would be ideal if this was within a nice walking distance. In fact, let's check what is the walking distance from the property to the train station. And to be honest with you, what I tend to apply is when it comes to determining if the distance is good or not, if you've got a walking distance of 10 minutes per 100,000 people living in the area, then that's a good distance. What I mean by that, let's say that Stoke-on-Trent will have, for example, and I'm guesstimating now, about 300,000 people living in Stoke. That means that for every 100,000 people, a good walking distance to key amenities would be like 10 minutes, right? But Stoke has got 300,000 people. Obviously, that's an assumption. I would just have to check it. Presuming they've got 300,000 people, if key amenities are within 30-minute walk, that's acceptable. The bigger the city, of course, the more tolerable the walking distance is. Of course, there will be public transport, so people don't have to walk. But that's how I would kind of determine that if I can get to, let's say, train station up to 30 minutes on foot, and then maybe 5 to 10 minute drive by car, then that would to me indicate that this is an acceptable distance. So let's check what's the walking distance from Camellia Street to the train station. We can see that driving is 8 minutes and walking is 28. So walking, I would say, is probably a bit on the top layer, if that makes sense. I wouldn't disqualify that. I also would be probably looking for properties that are a little bit closer. But the thing is, we are in the middle of a lot of different amenities. So if we get closer to the train station, then naturally we'll get further away from Newcastle under Lyme and hospital, etc. So we always have to sacrifice something. I still think that this property is located pretty well, considering we've got a lot of different things, probably within half an hour walk radius from this property. And in this time, somebody can get to cinema here, to hospital. So I would probably say location wise, we're in a pretty good location. And as you could see, it looks nice, it looks modern, it's a residential area. So this could potentially work well for our service accommodation. Now, another thing I want to focus on is that this is a terraced house, which means that there won't be any leasehold paperwork, right? So we don't have to worry about head of lease. We know that there is nobody looking after the ground or owning the ground who tell us you cannot do service accommodation. This one element is already eliminated from the equation, which is great. We would just have to check right now with the owner if the mortgage conditions allow short stays and service accommodation business model in this property under mortgage product. At that point, I can tell that I am fairly happy with the location. I'm fairly happy with the street views, and I'm happy after the viewing. And I'm sitting and I'm drinking my coffee right now. What's the next thing I would do is I would go to Airbnb. So Airbnb is probably a website that everybody knows, right? It's a website where you can book your short stays, and it's a great tool to find some comparables. Now, of course, there are some paid search engines and paid pieces of software that can do that for you in seconds, but let's say that we don't have that. We will also be covering that. For now, though, I always like to go for Airbnb because I find Airbnb is a great source of looking at the competition, seeing what they charge, what their occupancies are, and so on and so on. So let's type in Stoke-on-Trent. In terms of them asking us, Stoke-on-Trent. In terms of them asking us for dates, I'm going to put in flexible. It's going to be week. That's absolutely fine. And at guests, we have a 3-bedroom property. That 3-bedroom property could easily fit at least 5 people, right? If we've got a sofa bed in the living room, it would be 7. So let's say I wouldn't feel the maximum number of people over there. I would just go somewhere in the middle. I would go maybe 3 people at that point, right? So I'll just click search. Ideally, what I want to do now is I want to navigate around the map to find the area that we looked at. Because we can see this is our Newcastle on the Lyme. This is where our hospital would be, somewhere here. Then we've got our Hanley, and this is the Stoke-on-Trent sign. I think the train station was somewhere around here. So our property, if I remember rightly, is somewhere here, right? And we've got some properties listed here. So that's great. So let's go through them. We've got this one. I'll click on it. We've got this one. I'll click on it as well. We've got this one. Let me click. Let's open up as many as we can locally. So we've got 5 properties now. Okay. So this one is entire home in Stoke-on-Trent. It's got 2 bedrooms, 3 beds, 1 bathroom. So it's a smaller property. They are charging 86 per night. Let's have a look at their calendar. So when we open up the calendar, we can see what the property is like in terms of the bookings. I typically would love to see the property fully booked for at least the next month. When it comes to other people, different people teach different things. However, I learned that especially in 2024, we can see that the market is closer going towards final and last minute bookings, which means that if you check something 3 months upfront, that could be way too much. I would focus on 1 month upfront. Today is 5th of September, so I would focus on September and maybe slightly towards the October as well. I would be looking at, and we can see that this property is booked for the next week. Then it's empty for the following week, and then it's booked for another week. So we can see that the property is booked in like 50%. It's not the end of the world because, as I say, there is a very good chance that this property could be booked like 1 or 2 days before, or even on the same day. I'm getting this pretty much all the time as well. So when I see that my calendar is empty in specific times of the year, I'm not panicking because, especially this year, I could say and I could tell that last minute bookings are more and more popular. So we've got this one property, right? Let me go to the next one. And that one has got 4 bedrooms and 6 beds. So that one on the flip side is a bigger property. Now that one is 117 per night, right? So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to open up the calendar. Obviously, everything up to the 5th will be crossed out because that's in the past. We can see that this property is booked for the next week or so. Then we've got 5 days empty. Then we've got weekend booked, and then another 5 days empty. And then we've got some bookings just for the weekend. So we can tell that this property tends to be filled on the weekends, where obviously we can charge more. Weekdays, it's kind of 50-50, right? So again, I wouldn't get worried too much. If that September was fully booked, then I would say, wow, this property is doing absolutely amazing. There's no doubt our property could work as well. It just means that when it comes to this, you can see that this property has been staged very, very lovely. And just looking at the photos, obviously we can tell that there are some professional photos, great staging, great colors. That is why the property is getting bookings, right? Because it attracts somebody's eye. It definitely is a property where I would love to stay if I was looking for a property in Stoke, of course. Let me go to the next one. I don't need any translations. So we've got another property, and what I see straight away, the quality of the photos are not as good as on the previous property, especially the front one. The front photo is not that great. Let me go through more photos. Okay, you can see the bathroom. Bathroom is nice. Bedroom 2, bedroom 1. Okay, nice kitchen. We've got the living area. Okay, awesome. So we've got 2 bedrooms, 2 beds, 1.5 bathrooms. Happy days. Okay. So that property is £90 per night. So again, because our property is 3 bedrooms, and obviously we'll just stage it nicely and we'll just make the photos just stand out like with the previous property, I think we could be charging something between 100 and 110 per night. Let me just go to this calendar and see what's happening. So we've got some vacancy here, then we've got 2 days booked here, and then vast majority of September is actually emptying this property, so it's not doing as great in terms of like early bookings comparing to other properties. Reason being is you can see the quality of the photos. That's in my opinion going to be the main problem of that previous property. This, however, has got professionally taken photos. We can see and we can tell it's got nice furniture, it's nice and modern, nice little breakfast area. So you can see everything is up to date, up to scratch, right? Yeah, very nicely staged. I like it. The property is 3 bedrooms, 4 beds, 2 bathrooms, so very close to our spec, right? And the property is 108 per night. Now let's have a look if the property is popular. What I noticed is that the property has got 6 reviews. It hasn't got big numbers, so I would say probably property is not on the market on Airbnb for a long time. But again, the property has got just one booking from Sunday to Wednesday. So that tells me that perhaps this area is not the best for higher occupancy rates, right? We can see what we can charge. We can charge somewhere between £100 and 110 for our property, to be honest with you. But I would be a little bit concerned about the occupancy on that property. As much as I love Airbnb, we also cannot exclude Booking.com. Whether we like it or not, I know there are plenty of people saying that Booking.com's interface is not very friendly. They're not very helpful with their customer service. Sometimes it takes hours on the phone in order to deal with them and sort something out. I get it. I've been there as well. However, Booking.com has got the biggest budget out of all of them. They spend tons of money on marketing, and for this reason, if we want to have full occupancy or close to full occupancy, then definitely we cannot exclude Booking.com. And for this reason, right now, let me also go to my Booking.com and also carry on our due diligence on Booking.com. Okay, so we're going to type in Stoke-on-Trent. This is where we are. When it comes to the date, I will just say I'm flexible. And then I'm going to stick to the same filter, which is 3 people, 3 adults. And then I'm going to click search. So there they are. This is the main view. And to be honest with you, I don't like to spend time on those ads. Instead, I just prefer to go on the map view straight away, because we want to find properties that are fairly local to our property. And for that reason, map view works perfectly fine. Oh, I can see Royal Stoke University Hospital is here. So our property would be there, somewhere here, right? So let's see at what do we have available around. So we've got one here. We've got this one here. We've got another one here. We've got this one. So most of them we've already seen on Airbnb, right? But there will be properties that are just on booking.com and they are not on Airbnb as well. So we want to see what's happening and what's cooking, right? So let's have a look at our property number 1, which is this one, the terrace hut. Fabulous, 4 reviews. Okay, the property looks okay. I don't see anything bad about the property, but it's also not like the top notch, right? We can tell it's just nicely staged, but you can see that this is very traditional house with fairly traditional layout. So let me close that. Now what I want to do, I want to see their calendar, right? So I want to click on check available dates. We go to the same property. So automatically booking.com has allocated 9th of September till 14th of September randomly. But it says that in those dates, this property is not available from 9th to 14th. And it says select different dates. It doesn't even say which dates it would be available. So typically, when it comes to this, it provides some dates at the bottom of that same sort of time, which would be like 5 days, and it would say when that property would be available around this time frame. So we can see that this property hasn't got availability in the upcoming weeks, which is good, which is positive. If it's booked out, happy days. It just proves to us that there is a demand, right? We've got this property as well. So obviously we've seen that property on Airbnb. Let me check its availability. Oh, there you go. This is exactly what I said before. So we've got 9th till 14th. So it's not available in those dates, but it's available in 16th or the 17th or okay. So yeah, around those dates the property is available. So again, there's not a lot of availability, which means that majority of September is booked out. We have to take this with a little bit of pinch of salt, because often people don't have the channel manager, or they don't have any other software that would manage multiple calendars at the same time. So that property could be fairly available on Airbnb, but as you can see, it's not that available on booking.com. That just means that both calendars are probably not synced. And for this reason, we just have to take this with a bit of pinch of salt. But booking.com is telling us that this property could have less availability than we could assume from Airbnb. Let's move on to the next one. And let's see what this one is. I don't think we've seen that one. So again, let's have a look what it's made of. Okay, so this one is recommended for 3 2-bedroom apartment, 5 nights, 590, and it's available in specifically those dates. Okay, so that doesn't tell us a lot, right? We've got this property, we've got check availability at the right top. Clicking on this one would tell us So again, the property is not available from the 9th to 14th, but it's available from 12th to 16th and then 13th and then 14th and so on and so on. So we can see that essentially it's going to be available from 1 week onwards, right? So this property will be booked just for the next week. And then you can see that from the 12th, the property is fairly available. So this property is not doing great when it comes to the occupancy. Okay. Let's have a look on that one as well. It's a classic terraced house, nicely staged. Check availability. But for some reason, it does not show us the same property here. So something is going on there. So I wouldn't take this property really into account for our due diligence. Let's have a look again at the map and see if we can maybe find a few more comparables. As we can see in those dates, majority of those properties here are marked red, which means that in the date that booking.com allocated to us, this specific property is not available, which is fair enough. That's essentially is telling us that in the next week or so or 2 weeks, the local properties have got good occupancy, and that's what we want to see essentially. Let's open up a few more. Okay, so this is a hotel. Obviously, we cannot compare ourselves to hotel. For this reason, I wouldn't go for it. But we've got town center, very convenient. We've got the price listed. So this property is available around those dates, which is good. And it's £300 including taxes and charges. So for 5 nights and 3 adults, it's 575. So that's what somebody would pay. So it's just over £100 to book this property per night, right? So what we said on Airbnb, we can definitely see from the prices and the nightly rates that we can see on booking.com is that we can charge somewhere between 100 and 110 pounds. To be honest with you, what we've seen on Airbnb and what we've seen on booking.com, I am not 100% convinced about the occupancy rates in the area. For this reason, I probably would take this property with pinch of salt. Would I offer on this property? Possibly yes. When I do my calculations, though, I would have to take into account that this property will not be reaching on average like 80 or 90% occupancy where we want to be. And I would probably say this property would be achieving roughly about 50, maybe 60% to be on a safe side. That just tells me that this property would not make a great profit at the current rate. But we will go through some numbers a little bit later just to complete the full exercise so that we see if we want to offer on this property, and if we do, how much do we offer on it. One other search engine that I want to put into this due diligence process is Housing Anywhere. And exactly, this is housinganywhere.com. Housing Anywhere is a platform where people are looking typically for long-term stays. This is where you want to be if you're looking to rent your property out for somebody who's going to stay there for a longer period of time. So somebody is looking for a longer period tenancy, but they will be paying you on a nightly rate basis. Of course, Housing Anywhere will be taking their cut from it, but everything is nicely, clearly displayed for you. So in here, we just need to say where we want to go. So obviously we want to go Stoke-on-Trent, UK. Moving date, let's stick to the same date that booking.com gave us, right? So it was, I think, 9 till 14th. Let's say that. And let's click search. Okay, so this is it. We've got some properties listed. We have a property available 75 square meters, 3 bedrooms, £2,800, bills included. We've got another property which is 3 bedrooms as well, and that one is 2,640 per calendar month. We've got another which is 2,650, and that one is a 4 bedroom, and that one is for another 4 bedroom, 2427. So altogether in Stoke, we can see that there are only 6 properties, if I see rightly. That one is £900 per month. I think this is exactly, this is a private room. It's not the entire house, so obviously we don't take this into account. But we've got 3-bed properties, 3 and 4 bedroom properties, I would say, and the prices fluctuate between 2.4 and 3.3. So our property, probably to begin with, would be listed at somewhere like 2,600, maybe 2,700. This is the monthly revenue that we would get from the guest. Obviously, there is a commission that Housing Anywhere would take. Housing Anywhere essentially is like another OTA. So we have to take into account their cut. I believe that Housing Anywhere's commission is higher. It's about 25% as it stands right now. However, remember that if somebody is looking to rent out the property for the entire month and we've got 100% occupancy, then it's okay if somebody is charging more for this booking, because essentially we have 100% occupancy, 25% goes to the OTA, but the rest of it is our profit. If our property was listed at roughly around 2,500, for example, then 25% of it would be naturally deducted from this amount. So we have to take into account this cost as well when it comes to calculating our budget for this property. Housing Anywhere is a great tool to check and compare prices. It's not so great for occupancy rates, and for this reason, I will leave it at that. So, just to conclude, when it comes to this market, we can say that we could charge roughly between £100 and £110 per night. If we were to list it on Housing Anywhere, of course, that rate would be a little bit lower because somebody is looking for a long-term rent. It will be somewhere around 2,600, looking at what the market is offering to us. There is not a lot of competition, but at the same time, we have to remember what we've seen on other portals, that the occupancy rates are not the best in the area. Now, I don't want to say that the occupancy does not work in the area. I'm just saying that even including the fact that right now the last minute bookings are more popular, there are still properties with empty calendars in the upcoming week or so. For this reason, that just tells me that the occupancy in September is not great, which means that further we go into the year, into the winter season, the property could struggle with higher occupancy. For that reason, we would probably make a negative balance every single month when it comes to the winter months. And there is another element to the whole puzzle. As I mentioned, there are also subscription based softwares that allow you to get that information much, much quicker and analyze the area. And the most popular is AirDNA, but what I'm using is Property Market Intel. The difference between AirDNA and Property Market Intel is that AirDNA typically works in a region. If you're looking to invest in a specific area, then it's going to work for you okay. But if you want to have this flexibility that you want to analyze multiple areas across the entire UK, you can do that. Property Market Intel covers the entire UK. So I'm sure that if you're outside of the UK, there are other pieces of software like this, but AirDNA is fairly popular in the US, for example. So if you don't know, feel free to have a look at AirDNA. You can subscribe for free just to have a look and see how this works. But obviously, the better functionality and more data you'll get from a subscribed version. So let me just quickly log into my account. So this is it. We are in the main dashboard. In the main dashboard, obviously, we're looking to get our Airbnb research. And for this reason, I'm going to click Airbnb and Airbnb comparables. From this point, we can see we've got a lot of different options to pick from. I'm going to click overview, but I will also draw a custom location because obviously we don't want to be in Glasgow at that point and we want to find Stoke-on-Trent. There is also a search bar, so if you want, you can just type it in. Whoa, not this one. You can also type it in, but I want to just draw it up. So I'm just going to say square, not like that. One more time. We want to be somewhere like here. And then we can see there is a little dial showing us that we are in a green zone. So I will just click on it, update the location. So our data is displayed just from this area, which is obviously what we want to find, right? And it just shows us that the average daily rate is £83 and occupancy is £53. So yes, entire homes are definitely more popular. One bedroom property is more popular over 2 and 3 bedroom, and there are some amenities displayed as well. I'm not going to go heavy into this detail, but we can see that those numbers are actually there or thereabout as we went through the Airbnb and Booking.com analysis, right? We can see that we've got 83 on average for a nightly rate. Our assumption was that we're going to be somewhere between 100 and 110, but bear in mind that this just takes into account general stock on trend or the area that we just drew. But as we go to rates, we can see that we've got entire place at 112 on average, and the budget properties are 109, and mid-scale properties are 120. So our property would be there or thereabout. It would be around mid-scale, right? Because we would obviously dress it up nice, etc. So what I like to do, I like to go to the chart that we've got around here. We can see that there are different types of properties. There are luxury properties, economy, even budget properties. So it all depends which place in the marketplace you want to take. If we go back to the beginning of this video, if we want to be luxury, then obviously we would be comparing ourselves to the green line. But if we are going to take the middle kind of range, then we would be comparing ourselves to mid-scale, economy, and budget is just there to show us what's like the minimum rate. So let's have a look at the mid-scale, and we obviously have to pick it from in accordance with the right sort of time frame that we've got listed down below. So let's compare starting from like a year ago, 2023. We've got August, we've got September, and economy £94, mid-scale was 106, and upscale was 113. And as we go along, we can see that mid-scale properties are fluctuating between, oh, that one is 86, 87, 87, 91. And obviously, as we go into the summer season, of course, prices pick up a little bit. And 102, 96 in June, and then July it shows us at 106. So you see, when I said we're going to be roughly between 100 and 110, I think I was not wrong. And this data is just confirming to us that we are aiming at roughly about 100 to 110. Of course, if we apply a bit better of a better decor at the property and better staging, then we would be able to charge a little bit more, but not a lot. We want to keep a healthy balance between our pricing and making sure that we've got enough occupancy at that property. When it comes to occupancy, we will go to a tab with occupancy, and then we're going to be able to see what was the occupancy rate in the area across the last few years. Again, I'm not going back like 2-3 years because I just want to be a little bit more like what's happening right now. And as you can see, the occupancies just fluctuated from 41% to 59% in the summer. Like July 24, we've got 60%. So as you could see, that was kind of my due diligence research result when I thought that the occupancy rate in this area would not go higher than 60%. So we would be probably in between 50 or 60%. If we relied just on Airbnb and Booking.com, that would be our result. Unless we know that we've got people who will be staying there for a longer period of time, for example, contractors or relocators, or we have got a potential contract with, for example, a housing association where they will guarantee us something, or they will have continuous flow of people into that property, then we could aim at higher occupancy. But when it comes to just OTA like Airbnb, that's what we can expect. It's not the best, to be honest with you. Of course, we can compare seasonality and different things. I think right now it does not make a huge impact on the whole due diligence because we've already made a decision, or we already made a conclusion that this property's occupancy could be a bit of a problem for us. But for the sake of this exercise, I want to continue and I want to carry on just to show you what it actually is when I do my due diligence. So the next thing I would do is I would open up my browser. I would go to my Google and I would find some hotels in Stoke. What this means, what I'm looking to do here is, on top of all the online research, which is great that it can help us, it's obviously an essential part of doing our research in the area. We also can contact some local hotels and local service accommodation managers and even property managers just to ask them about their experience and expertise about this type of market. When it comes to contacting hotels, we also have to be careful because if we ring to the hotel and we say that, oh, I just want to have some information, I'm afraid you will not get that information from the hotel, right? But on the flip side, if you just ring them and you position yourself as somebody who's interested in staying in the area and you want to just ask what's the situation with occupancy, if, for example, you asked and you rang them like last minute, would they have occupancy, then they might give you some information about how busy they are. Because at that point, we want to establish how busy they are, whether they have a lot of clients, whether they haven't got full occupancy, whether people can easily book last minute or they typically are fully booked. Those things are information that you want to get from hotels and different SA managers in the area. I would definitely take and make 2, 3, 4 phone calls. I would say completed phone calls, not just 2, 3, out of which just one person answers and you think that that's enough. No, you want to speak and talk to at least 2 to 3 people to build even better and bigger picture about service accommodation market in Stoke. So I would go to my browser. Of course, I would just contact, for example, there are some hotels displayed on booking.com. So we've got Doubletree, we've got Weather Hotel. Again, I could go to my map and find like hotels that are like more local to our property. We obviously are not looking for some hotels just outside of Stoke-on-Trent because that just simply does not make sense. But we've got a hotel here. Oh, that's not actually a hotel. You get the point though. If that was for booking.com, we would find some hotels from the map view that are like relatively in that area, and we would just contact some of the hotels in the area. If we don't want to use booking.com, then as you could see, there is Trivago, TripAdvisor. So find some hotels, ring them. And as I say, do not just ring for information because they don't have any reason to give you that information. Instead, just present yourself as somebody who could potentially be staying in the area because you potentially could, right? And ask them what's the occupancy in terms of like if you rang them last minute, could you find accommodation, like how busy they are in this part of the season, etc. So you might get some information from them. You can also say serviced accommodation manager Stoke on Trent. Okay, so we've got some sponsored. I never sort of look at those sponsored ones. We've got True State Service Accommodation Management. So I'm going to open up that one. And we've got 53 Degrees Property, AirBNB Management in Stoke. There we go, we've got 2. So essentially that's what I would do. I would just find a property manager in the area who specializes in service accommodation, and I would simply give them a bell, give them a ring. And when you ring those companies, I would ring them to again tell them that you are looking to get some information about how it works between them and their clients, and also about how healthy the market is and what it is that they typically can offer when it comes to a 3-bedroom property in such and such area. In that case, this altogether will give you a full and total picture about this type of property, about the occupancy rates, the nightly rates, and it can start create this full picture for you, whether it's worth pursuing the area, whether that property makes financial sense, and whether this is where you want to stay, or perhaps you need to start shifting towards another patch because this patch for some reason does not really make financial sense. I hope I didn't lose you at some point of this module of this presentation where I showed you how to do the due diligence. And now, as you can probably guess, I want you to go out and find at least 5 properties on Rightmove, on Zoopla, on the market that you could potentially carry out your own due diligence, online due diligence, and perhaps if this is in your patch, then you could also contact some local agents, some local service accommodation providers, and also hotels to analyze your area even deeper so you understand what's viable, what's possible, and what you can do in the area, and what profits you can expect from this type of project. Once you do that, I want you to come back to this video so we can continue with analyzing our numbers, which is exactly what I plan to do right now. So now we get to the nitty gritty of numbers. Some people probably love it, some people hate it. The truth is that we really have to master this skill, because if we don't do our numbers right, we essentially set up our business for win or failure. So we definitely want to have our business on the winning side. And for this reason, we need to make sure that we do our numbers 100% correct. We have all the details now, so we just have to put them down in the applicable format, understand how we come up with figures, and then we can make an informed decision whether we want to pursue the deal or whether we want to go for another deal. We can then make some more decisions. And in all fairness, in business, all decisions should be based on facts and figures, right? So let's go into it and let's crunch some numbers together. First of all, we've got the first column or area of this spreadsheet, which says income. So let me start typing in the facts that we already collected from the due diligence from the previous module. So we already know that our nightly rate was somewhere between 100 and 110 pounds. So let's say that we could probably stretch it up to 220, as we could see from some examples. Let's keep it in the middle, and I will keep it at 110 pounds. Okay. We also determined that our occupancy would be somewhere between 50 and 60%. But let's say that we're going to make it look very, very nice and we're going to attract the right type of people. Let's say our occupancy would be 60%. Okay. So this will determine our income at that point. Next, I want to move to our area with costs. So I will introduce the same thing on the right hand side. In the first place, we need to understand the rent. I believe rent on that property was £950, and that was without any negotiations. So we just assume that's what we're going to be paying, of course. Then we've got utilities. We've got a 3-bedroom house, terrace, end of terrace property. Typically, it's a residential house. And if you're living in a 2-bedroom terrace house or 3-bedroom terrace house or any type of this size of property, it could also give you a very good understanding on how much you could potentially pay for bills in this property. I would determine utility bills in a 3-bedroom property at that point in time at around £200 per calendar month. So remember that it does not have to be the case. Our property will not be running all the time, but also there will be some guests that are coming and turning on the heating extra. They could just be doing some crazy stuff. So let's say that it will be £200. Now, the next thing is council tax. And from the due diligence, and also what I showed you in video number 2, there is a website called mycounciltax.org.uk. And from that website, you can really quickly determine what would be the council tax in that property. But also remember that we have physically seen that property. We met those people at the property. So we can easily ask them the question, what is the council tax? Or at least, what is the council tax band in that property? Because then it will allow us to understand how much council we're going to be paying in that property. But I've already checked that just before recording this video, and this area, the most popular council tax band is B, and I believe that B comes to around £128 per month. And that's what I'm going to type in, 128. Next one down, we've got water. For a 3-bedroom property, residential house, we're talking roughly about 60 to 70 pounds water bill. So I'm just going to type in 60. Broadband typically comes somewhere between £30, £40. Of course, we can just stretch it to 50. There is no point of doing that. So I'll just say £40. And typically, I always try to get a broadband with no contract or a 1 month notice contract. That gives me flexibility. And typically, you pay a little bit more for this broadband. But if you wanted to terminate the contract in 6 months' time, because, for example, you have to hand the property back to the owner, then you don't have to stay for another 12 months, for example, or another 18 months with the broadband supplier because you have this flexibility on the contract. But trust me, there are contracts that are flexible and you can get within £40 for this type of agreement. Next, we've got TV license or Netflix and Netflix. So TV license right now is roughly about £14, maybe 14.50 maximum per calendar month. And then on top of that, we've got a Netflix subscription. So if you want to be aiming at mid-range up a little bit higher, and we said that we want that, then obviously we need to take into account the Netflix subscription. And I think right now Netflix subscription can come to like £12. So altogether, TV license and Netflix, let's say it's going to be £25. Then we've got our cleaning and linen, and that's per changeover. We're going to be crunching in a second how many changeovers we're going to have, but for now, we just need to understand how much we're going to be paying per one cleaning and per one change of linen. So typically, a 3 bedroom property around Midlands area, we're talking roughly about 60 to £70 cleaning fee, including linen. When it comes to cleaning and linen in a 3 bedroom property, I would probably increase that amount to £80. Probably you could find somebody a little bit cheaper, not a lot, but also there could be some cleaners who are a little bit more expensive. I think £80 in this case would be okay. When it comes to our booking fees, we need to understand that when we list that property on OTAs, just like Booking.com or Airbnb, they all have their own commissions, right? And they will charge you the amount based on the bookings that they receive on their platforms. Those booking fees vary from one platform to another. Booking.com, for example, is 15% plus VAT. Airbnb is sometimes 15% plus VAT, sometimes it's 3% plus VAT. Verbo is even different. So I want to say that it's going to be very hard to be right on point with our booking fees at that point. However, if we take into account that for every single booking we're going to be paying 15% plus VAT, then we can't go wrong with it, right? Because if anything, it will be just working in our favor, but it's not going to be going in a negative side. So if anything, we're going to be making more profits rather than less profits. And for that reason, I'm going to say 15 plus VAT, which is around 16 point something. I'm going to say 16%. And then we've got management fee to take into account. So the question really is, are you looking for a management company because you want to be hands off from the very beginning, or whether you want to put your hands on it, get your hands a little bit dirty, and really just save some money on management fees? The reality is that nowadays you can make it work with management companies, but typically in those areas where the occupancies are higher, where nightly rates are higher, if that was coming to Stoke in the first place, and even providing this would be your very first property or you're somewhere at the start of your business, you probably, I wouldn't recommend you to get a management company in place because that will be eating out from your profit a lot. So at that point, I'm going to say zero. This is something that you can explore later when your property portfolio grows, and then you can find somebody who's going to be reliable and who's going to be managing your portfolio in general if you want to take a step back. For now, however, let's stick to zero, okay? Next, we've got others. So we want to determine what will be our minimum night stay. This is important because we need to understand how often we will do changeovers. And unless you don't have anybody set up front, like for example, you're going to have a group of contractors who you know will be staying there from day one and they will be there for like 6 months. If you're looking to go the traditional way of advertising on Booking.com, Airbnb, and Verbo, and so on, then you have to take into account that at the beginning, you're going to have slightly higher rates of changeovers before you get to those long-term bookings. And that's how I would base our calculations on the fact that you're going to have some more changeovers. I would never recommend you to have minimum night stay 1, because it would apply a lot of changeovers, a lot of cleaning, unless it really works well in your area. But if you're in Stoke, then we already know that probably people wouldn't be staying for 1 night, and the minimum night stay I would apply would be either 2 or 3. What it actually does as well is, if you've got like 1 night stay, then you're kind of attracting people who might just want to come for 1 night. Maybe they just want to have a little bit of a party. Maybe they just want to do some illegal activity. Maybe, and next morning they just want to leave, and you will never hear back from them again. So I found a little bit safer option, especially for the startups and for the beginners, is to go with minimum 2, ideally 3. So here I'm going to say 3, but it's up to you whether you want to allow even shorter stays. Okay. And then we've got price per additional guest. What it means is that, let's say our property is a 3-bedroom property, and then we could host up to 8 people in that property, right? So we have to say that the price, regardless of the number of how many people, will be the same. And then above that number, we will increase that nightly rate by a specific amount. So typically, I would say it should be somewhere between 3 and 4. What it means? It means that if you've got a family of 2 people or even 3 people, it means that they will pay, let's say, £110 per night regardless. If, however, there are 5 people coming to that property, then they will be paying the base rate at 110, plus they've got additional 2 people, and then let's say per each person you're going to be charging them additional £10. It means that your nightly rate will increase to £130 per night. This is something that you can apply, and this is something that professional SA managers do as well. Again, I will just say that additional price would be £10 per guest. However, I would base our calculations based on fact that all our bookings were just coming at the base rate. Okay, so it would be £110. So now we've got all the details written down, black and white, clearly just the way I like it. Now let's crunch those numbers together. So in the first place, we want to make sure how much of income we're going to be making at 60%. And the way I will calculate it is simply by going to my calculator. I want to say that I'm going to be charging 110 times 30 days in a month. That would be the income if we had 100% occupancy, but we've got 60%. It's equal to 0.6, right? So I'm just going to say times 0.6. So our gross income in a single month, providing we have 60% occupancy, will be 1980. Let me just write it down in here. 1980. That's probably the worst 9 I've ever made. Let me just correct it. That's 1980. Okay, we are getting there. Next, we want to calculate our costs. So we're just going to say 950 plus 200 plus 128 plus 60 plus 40 plus 25, and we get to a point where we need to come up with cleaning and linen and those things. So at that point, let me just press this button, which is 1403. Okay, 1403. That is the cost of the monthly fixed things like utilities, council tax, etc. Now we also need to take into account our cleaning and linen fees, right? So we already established that we're going to be operating at 60% occupancy, and we already established that our minimum night stay is 3. What it means is that we won't have more changeovers than 30 days divided by 3. Okay, so if I go to the back to the calculator, we say 30 divided by 3, that gives us 10 changeovers in a month, providing we would have fully occupied month, so 100% occupancy, and then every single booking was for 3 nights only. That would be 10 cleanings, right? 10 changeovers. Now I'm gonna multiply that by 0.6 because that's our occupancy rate, which gives us 6 changeovers in a month. Okay, so here at the right hand side, I'm going to write it down and say that we have 6 changeovers. Okay, let me just move it to this side. So we've got 6 changeovers, and that 6 we need to multiply by 80 because that's gonna be our cost for general cleaning and change of linen, right? Times 80. So the cost is £480, right? So I'm just gonna say 480. And then we've got our booking fees. So this is also something that we have to take into account. What we're gonna do, because the booking fees are always calculated from the gross income. It's not after any deductions, which means that we need to multiply 1980 times 16%. That's going to be what the OTAs will be charging us, right? So let me just click this, clear the calculator, and we're going to say 1980 times 0.16. £316, that's going to be the OTA's fees for their services, essentially for them accommodating the platform for us to be able to advertise on their platforms. That's what they will charge us. So what I'm going to do, I'll just minus that 1980, and that's 1663. That would be our income 1663. I hope you're following me on that, because soon after this, what I want you to do is I want to do exactly the same exercise and do it multiple times so you get a really good feel of it, and then you feel comfortable about the numbers, because that essentially is like so important element, such an important element of your business, of you running the service accommodation business. Okay. And then we, at the end of it, we've got management fees. As we determined at that point, we're not looking for any management companies to begin with, because they will even charge us more for their services, and we don't need it, especially at the beginning of running our rent to service accommodation business. So let's crunch some numbers together, right? So just going to zoom it out, and then we want to understand how much is our total spend in a month. So we've got 1403 plus 480, that's 1883. That's all in, right? As you can see, the property on the left hand side, however, you can see that our property is making us 1663. What that means is 1663 is less than 1883, which means that with this business model at 60% occupancy, we're going to be losing money, because we have less money coming into our pocket than we've got for the outgoings, which means that it is not a great business for us, which means that obviously if you want to do somebody a favor, but you're going to be even wasting your money because you're going to be losing money every single month, then it's up to you, suit yourself. But this is not a good business, right? You can see black and white that you've got certain costs to take into account. Remember that you cannot argue with your numbers. You either go with your numbers and you make it work, or you go against them and it will sting you in a backside very, very quickly. I've seen people who didn't know what they were doing, or they were actually increasing the numbers like nightly rates. They were hoping for higher occupancy because they were just hoping that the business will be going so well. And then at the end of it, like 2, 3, 4 months later, people were just screaming and crying because the numbers just didn't work for them, and that just meant the business did not stack at all. Especially when you start, imagine yourself having your very first deal that is making you a loss of around £200. Like, in what position it will put you when your business starts with making a loss? It's not a great business at all, and that does not even include initial costs into account. Let's say that you found a property that is unfurnished, that you haven't got any furniture in that property. You have to put in some money in order to decorate it and stage it and do some photographs. Obviously, everything is either money investment or time investment. You're going to be spending your resources on the property that's going to be making you a loss, that you're already in the negative ROI. You don't want to be there. But on this occasion, there is no sense to go and calculate the return on investment because we are in a negative balance. So it's pointless pursuing this deal unless you go to the landlord and you tell him that you want this property for like £400 or £300 per calendar month, and then you're going to be looking after the property, which is obviously an irresistible offer, irresistible offer for the landlord. Now, so what I'm trying to say here is that be cautious, be careful with the numbers. Just because it didn't stack on this particular deal does not mean that it's not going to stack at all, right? There will be properties where it will make more sense, where you're going to have higher nightly rates, where you're going to have higher occupancies. It just didn't work for this specific property or this specific area. So UK is a huge country, or wherever you are. If you're in the US, your country is massive. Like in Australia, your country is massive. So opportunities are there like everywhere. You just need to find a property where you're going to have higher nightly rate, and hopefully you're going to be getting to higher occupancy as well. All right, so now I want to also indicate what matters the most when it comes to establishing whether the rent to rent service accommodation deal is a good deal or it's a bad deal. So I want you to understand, if it comes to you calculating the deal at 50%, this should tell you a lot about the property. Essentially, if you can break even at 50% of your occupancy and everything above that will be your profit, that will be deemed as acceptable deal. Anything below that is not acceptable. We already see that at 60% with this deal, we are still below our monthly expenses. So that deal is a very bad deal, right? But let's say that you've got at 50% occupancy, we're making 2K, and our monthly spendings are 2K. What that means is that we're breaking even at 50%, but at 60%, we would be making, for example, 2.5K, let's say, which is greater than 2K spendings, right? Or roughly 2K. Maybe your spendings will increase slightly because you've got obviously maybe one more changeover or stuff. But you understand the concept of it. If at 50% you're breaking even, you're going to be okay. If you're not breaking even, do not touch the deal or try to go back to the landlord and negotiate a better deal with them, because only then it will make sense for you to take the deal on and even invest some of your money or time into this deal. I also want to emphasize that you should have a target when it comes to occupancy. When you do your due diligence, when you do your research, ideally you're looking at 70% occupancy or higher. So areas that will be very popular, I can imagine Windsor, or parts of London, for example, they will have high occupancies, and those properties will never struggle with people coming into the property. And that's what you want to see. When you do your due diligence, you want to see from those calendars, you want to see maybe from your subscribed software that your property will not struggle with high occupancy. And for this reason, you're hoping that your property will be at 70% or more. And if you're sticking to the rule that you're breaking even at 50%, then at 70%, you should be already making a good enough profit. And it also comes down to return on investment, but I'm not going to go into this subject because we've already covered that to a good detail in video number 1. But if you haven't seen that, then please go back to video number 1 and understand what is your return on investment. The target is exactly the same for service accommodation. So ideally, if you can at least twice in a year return your initial investment, that's going to be a good ROI. So your ideal return on investment will be 200% plus, or if not, then hopefully you're looking to get your initial investment back within 6 to 9 months. So these are the requirements, these are the criteria in rent to rent in order to determine if the deal makes sense or it doesn't make sense. One final thing is, on this service accommodation property or any other service accommodation property, I would not go with a deal if I wouldn't be making a clear profit of minimum £500. And that's an absolute minimum. I wouldn't even accept less. So take into account those considerations. Be sure that you're in profit. Make sure that you're breaking even at 50%. Be sure that your return on investment is minimum 200% or there or thereabout. And then you're going to be fine with your due diligence. You're going to be fine with your property. You're going to be fine with submitting an offer. And then, even if you have to negotiate the price a little bit down, you have a valid reason. Don't be afraid to go back to the landlord or to the letting agent. You can explain them how did you come up with, because when you do explain them how did you actually do it, your numbers will actually make sense to them. And if they don't understand, they will start understanding that you're a professional person, knowing what they know, what they do. And if you perceive this way, you're not going to struggle with at least justifying your offer. And even if you get rejected, it's not going to be rejected in a negative way. They'll say, okay, we understand where you're coming from, but unfortunately this is not acceptable for us. But at least, even if it's a letting agent, they know that you know what you're doing, and it will be easier for them to work with you in the future. And if they have potential leads and deals, if you sustain good contact with them and you're in touch with them and you sustain that rapport, you will have potentially good leads coming from them in the future. I hope you did enjoy this session. I know it's a heavy session. Numbers are very, very challenging. And for this reason, I want to make it a little bit easier for you. If you haven't joined my 30-day challenge, then this is a great opportunity for you to do it. What we've got is we've got set of calculators, and one of them is also our calculator for service accommodation. So this calculator very quickly and simply allows us to calculate and do the whole maths for us. If we just put in some digits and some numbers in the right places, then we have a clear breakdown of what it is that we're making at 50%, what it is that we're making at 75% and at 100%, and whether we're breaking even at 50%. So this tool is very, very handy if you want to be a professional renter, if you really want to calculate those deals quickly and you don't want to go through the same process of calculating and going through the numbers and eliminating the fact that you can really slip up at any point of your calculations, then this spreadsheet will be absolutely essential for your renter and business. If you want to put your hands on it and have access to it for lifetime, then I suggest go back to the description and you will find a link to our 30-day challenge where you will find this calculator, HMO calculator, and many, many other benefits. When you click, you will see exactly what's part of the 30-day challenge. I encourage you at that point to go. There is a very, very small fee to join the challenge, and it will be great to welcome you as our client and work with you so you can secure 8 pre-qualified viewings in the next 30 days and every single month moving forward. Let's move on with our program. Let's move on with what we've got left. Okay, great. So now we have all the numbers. Now we have all the due diligence carried out. We now have to go back to the landlord or to the letting agent and submit the offer. If you remember, in video number 2, we covered this subject to a great depth and good detail. I gave you some pointers on how to submit offers. Of course, if you have any preference, feel free to do whatever you feel best with. But if you don't know how to do it, or you think you could do with a little bit of advice, then definitely go back to video number 2 or watch this video again, or maybe there's just this section about submitting offers, and that should give you a good understanding on what your offer should include and how it should be structured and how to actually send offers in order to make it easy for the letting agent and easy for the landlord. You have to help them make a decision. So do it in a format so that is as easy as possible for them. With service accommodation, there are no exceptions. So make sure that you've captured everything. When you submit your offer, make sure that everything is captured, everything is clear. And if you feel that you're offering less than they really want to, then you can always justify how you came up with the numbers that you are presenting in front of them, it will make the whole situation ironed out a little bit. If somebody came to you, for example, and they said that they want to buy your product for £100 less, let's say the value of the product is £1,000, they are offering you £900, and they will say, I'm buying that from you today for 900. You would want to understand why. If you believe that the market value of this product is £1,000 and they are offering 900, perhaps they've got something to say. They have a reason why they believe £900 is what they are willing to pay. Is it about the product itself, or maybe it's because they haven't got any more money? The difference is huge. But if they can really justify why they cannot pay more, then sometimes it might make sense. And it works exactly the same way when you submit offers. So if you can justify how you came up with your offer, why your offer is a bit below the asking rent, then all of a sudden it will retain the contact that you've created. It will retain all the rapport that you built. And on top of that, if you present it in the right way, they might just say, I actually didn't think about it. I understand where they are coming from. And maybe they will reconsider your offer. It's not that all of your offers all of a sudden will be accepted. It's not about that. But if you make it in a nice, ethical way, and you come up with the rent that you came up with, and you give them the solid reason why you came up with it, then look, the worst thing that can happen to you is you will not get that property, but at least you retain that contact and you retain that relationship. And that's what it's all about. In rent to rent, actually, the contact is more important than the actual deal. Remember that, especially when it comes to people with multiple properties, like letting agents, for example. A good contact, a good letting agent is worth much more than one rent to rent deal. Remember that. Now you're a pro, you're submitting offers like a pro, you're calculating rent to SA deals like a pro, you're doing all the due diligence like a pro. And the consequence is simple. You will find your first rent to SA deal very, very quickly if you apply those steps accurately and you stick to the path. Next step, obviously, for you will be to sign a management agreement. And we covered this subject to a good depth in video number 2. And the difference between HMO and service accommodation when it comes to management agreement is not actually that big. The type of agreement remains exactly the same. So we're still staying with the management agreement. And the principle of the management agreement is that it's still a legally binding contract. However, we are still acting outside and beyond the Housing Act of 2004. If we do that, then we still are doing subletting, but it's no longer the violating subletting. It's no longer the illegal type of subletting. And for this reason, if we do it right under our limited company structure, then all of a sudden we are within the legal boundaries and we are not violating any rules and regulations in the UK. Happy days, we're winning, right? So when it comes to the management agreement for service accommodation, we just have to make sure that it clearly is specified in the contract that we are going to use the property for short-term lets, for service accommodation, or for holiday lets. If we specify that clearly in the contract, of course, we have to say that the landlord knows about it, that he's happy with this business model, and what's even more important is that he's provided you with the evidence, or he physically checked that you or your company, you're entitled to do this type of business at that property and you're not violating any rules and regulations either with the mortgage lender or if the property is a leasehold property, head of lease. Make sure that you've got this clause in that contract, because if you haven't, then it can really sting you in the future. On top of that, I would also protect you and your business for any reimbursements and costs that you might incur as a consequence of them not checking it. What I mean by that is, imagine, for example, a situation where you rent out this property from this landlord and you're acting on it fine for like 3, 4, 6 months. You get your calendar booked for like 2, 3 months ahead, or you've got some bookings, and all of a sudden, somebody found out that you're doing rent to SA at that property. They will come back to the landlord will come back to you, and you will have to essentially just wrap up the business. You won't be entitled to do this business at that property any longer. What happens next is you then have to cancel all the bookings that you've got in calendar for the upcoming months. And what that means to your business is every time you cancel somebody's stay and it's your fault or it's coming from your end, there could be a penalty, there could be a fee. If the landlord did not do this check properly, they said it's okay, and then 6 months later, you have to wrap up your business. This is not your fault. This is not your responsibility. Therefore, if you've got the right clause saying that if anything happens and it's not your fault, and for the reasons that are associated with the landlord is obligated to refund you and reimburse you any costs that you sustain as a business and as a consequence of them not doing the right check. If you've got this clause, that's already a massive protection for you and your business, because obviously you cannot take responsibility for things that are beyond your control. Otherwise, you will end up with a significant bill at the end of this deal. You have not even made your money back yet, or the initial investment yet. And on top of that, you've got more costs coming in because you have to start the cancellation processes for all those guests that have already booked. So make sure that you're protected in this way. But it's not the only thing that you have to be aware of. There are many, many things that should be captured by the right management agreement. And the more watertight your contract is, the better it's for you. And it then clearly specifies who was responsible for what and who owes money to whom. It's very critically important, and that's why the management agreement is a type of agreement that you should not write at the back of the napkin, for example, or that you think you can just go online and you can just find a template that's going to work and suit everybody else. The thing is, if you're going into rent-to-rent business, and you are going to operate legally right, ideally you will have a contract that will be bespoke made by a qualified solicitor who's got experience with management agreements and is going to write the right management agreement just for your business. If it's going to be capturing HMOs, whether that's going to be capturing service accommodations, holiday lets, how to protect your business, how to also protect the landlord. And if you at that point say that you don't have enough capital to invest in this contract, or maybe you're wondering how much this contract could cost. In the first place, I think the cost can vary very, very much depending on the type of solicitor. But if we talk about the solicitor who's already got experience with those type of agreements and who knows about rent to rents, then I would say costs might start from £1,000 for the contract template for your business specifically. So if you are looking to be serious about rent, if you are going to make thousands of pounds every single month and you cannot spend a grand or £2,000, for example, on the management agreement, then I believe that at that point you might still be mentally not ready for rent to rent business in the first place. The other solution that I've got for you is you could speak to people and get yourself a direction of whom you could work with in order to get the right and legally written management agreement. Programs, coaching programs, maybe there are some other mentoring programs that could help you with the management agreement. Certainly, this is something that we provide for our clients as well, because we want to make sure that once they join our program, they've got everything in one place. So maybe you could think about joining something similar that would cover you for everything, including the legal help as well, because then you know, and you've got the 100% guarantee that the contract is professionally drafted, that your business is protected, and if anything you can count on somebody's help, because if that was drafted by a professional solicitor and you've got any doubts in the future, then you can always go back to that solicitor because he was the one writing this agreement, right? Or people who provided you with the agreement, you can always go back to them and ask them for help. Whereas if you are trying to figure it out and cut corners because you want to do it as cheap as possible or ideally for free, then you're putting yourself and your business at a massive risk. You don't know how obsolete this contract could be, or maybe this agreement is just simply no longer the case. And there are clauses in that contract that are pretty much beyond the current rules and regulations. So that's something I want to urge you with. If this is something that you're not ready, then maybe this is not the right time for you. Take a step back. And when you feel that you're mentally ready for it, that's the time to really move forward. Remember that you're investing in your business and the business will be bringing you a lot of profit in the future. So do not be afraid to invest in you. Do not be afraid to invest in your resources, because once you do and you go in the right direction, there is only one way it can all finish for you. And that's going to be a big success. And now it's some fun time, staging time. I know Some people hate it, but vast majority of you will definitely enjoy this step. Now you've got the property agreed. Now you've got your keys in hand, or you're just obviously expecting to get some keys in the nearest future. Now you have to think about how you're going to stage the property in order to make the property stand out, because that's what you might have to do. You cannot be just like any other property in the marketplace, because when people go to Airbnb or booking.com, they will simply see another property. They will just be price matching you, comparing you to other properties, and that's not what you want. It's not always about the price. It's all about the interesting, quirky stuff that you can put in that property that will attract some people, and they will even sometimes prefer to pay a little bit more because they just prefer your decor over other properties in the area. So have a think about how you could make that property look crispy, sharp, interesting, quirky, so that other people will see more value in it from the photos that you're going to be uploading to your OTAs. And I know certainly the female part of the audience that is listening to this video will love this part especially well. And to be honest with you, when I started doing rent to rent, I didn't have a lot of sense about a tastable and ethical decor. I always relied on my wife when it comes to this, and that's why it's always good to have a second opinion or somebody who could just maybe even advise you a little bit on staging. And I know typically women love this part. They are naturally talented with this very often. So you can, of course, we're going to go through it right now, but the creativity and imagination when it comes to this is endless. So use whatever sources or resources you want in order to stage your property well. Remember that at the end of it, the goal is to make the property look so nice and so outstanding that other people will not hesitate to book your place, just because just by the looking at the photos, people just want to stay there, and that's it, period. So let's get ready to the staging time. First of all, I would get some inspiration. I love Pinterest, and if you haven't heard of Pinterest, then you probably are not up to date and up to scratch with what's happening around the world right now, but I suppose you do understand what Pinterest is. You can go to Pinterest and you can find a lot of inspiration, what's modern, what's trending right now, because we also have to follow some trends if we want to be like on top of the market, right? Google is another fantastic tool. So all you have to do is just type in on Google current trends, interior design, do photos, just click photos, and it will show you what's actually currently trending, and it will help you a lot as well. And I also love Facebook groups. There are multiple, like hundreds of them on Facebook. Facebook groups with service accommodation, interior design. You can go on those Facebook groups, you can infiltrate them, and there's going to be a lot of inspiration from people who came up with some interesting ideas, or who are just like professional interior designers who are sharing some nice and good tips and tricks. So here I really want to show you very quickly on Pinterest. We've got 2024 interior design trends thread. So you can see that there are hundreds and thousands of photos with different ideas. Now, it has to fall within your taste, of course, and what's kind of happening and how you want to dress this property. Because, of course, there will be certain features that will completely be out of this world that you don't even want to look at. That's absolutely fine. But it will also give you some positive inspiration. Maybe, let's say, color. You like this color, for example. You like this brownish red kind of color that could be trending right now. Brilliant. Or maybe you want to stage this property in this type, where you've got kind of like a Mexican theme over there with those lamps and those chairs. And, maybe that would be your theme, that would be your taste. And you've got some kitchen trends if you want to have a look. So there you go. You've got so much inspiration over there just from looking at those photos. Find a thread that really suits you, that you like a lot. And let's open this one, for example, and let's just get inspired from it. Like, look at this lovely bathroom. I mean, it's very unique, isn't it? You can tell. So maybe you will just get a bit of an idea about the tap, or maybe a lamp. Who knows? That's what I'm getting at. So the more you watch, the more you're going to get clear on the vision that you want to implement in that property. Next one down I want to talk about is to source quality furniture. If you have to furnish the property, then of course you need to find good quality furniture. And it's very often not just a case of going online or going to the shop and buying everything brand new, because at the same time it's a business, so we also have to be aware that we should have like initial budget to spend to dress the property, and we should stick to that budget. And very often, in order to help with our budget, we need to source furniture from people or from portals where people just market the second-hand used items. And there is nothing wrong with used items as long as they are in a good condition and you can really use them again at your property. So in the first place, I've got Facebook Marketplace. I found tons of different furniture from Marketplace where people just wanted to get rid of something for really just a fraction of price, or sometimes even for free. And I know my students are successfully sourcing from Marketplace as well. Another one is Gumtree, and I also found a lot of different pieces of furniture on Gumtree, like side tables, like lamps. And I also used Gumtree, and it's a very good tool, especially in a bigger city. Then we've got eBay, and this is typically stuff like brand new. I wouldn't necessarily go with the second-hand things because we just don't know what condition it will come with. But I would definitely go to eBay and see if you can find something interesting just for your property. And lastly, again, Facebook groups. If you go to groups like, let's say you're in London and you're going to go to Spotted London or Things for Sale London, then you will have a lot of different offers. People selling random things. Let's say you're looking for a sofa bed, for example. Then I would just go to Facebook groups and I would just type in the search box sofa bed. And maybe you'll find a sofa bed that will be at a good price, at a good condition, and it will fit your interior design concept. If it does, then happy days. Just set an appointment and go and pick it up. Let's also talk about linen here. This is something that people ask me a lot about. Should they buy linen? Should they rent linen? And options are available for all of us, right? It all depends whether we want to invest a little bit upfront in order to have our linen sets available, or whether we don't have that budget and we want to rent linen instead, and we will incorporate the cost into our monthly revenue. I prefer to have my own sets because I can then manage them, I can then control them. But if you don't have that budget, then ideally you can then find a local supplier who's providing linen. Typically, they also collect linen, they can do the washing, and then they can drop off another set for the cleaner to obviously dress up the duvet sets with the delivered linen. But have a think whether you would buy a brand new linen, or whether you would buy a or whether you would rent it out from somebody else. Regardless of what your decision is about this subject, make sure that you will have three sets. I tried to cope with two sets back in the day, and to be honest with you, it was doable. But all of a sudden, when something went missing or something got destroyed or damaged, then I still had to go and buy it because I just couldn't cope with just one item of two sets, if that makes sense. So having three sets is definitely helpful and beneficial, especially for cleaners. They really appreciate if there are three sets because they don't have to think and wonder about what's going to happen in case something happened with the other set, right? So have a think about how you can source ideally three sets of your linen and duvets, of course. And one thing I want to mention here is that typically white duvets are still most popular right now. If we want to create this hotel kind of standard where it all looks nice and neat and clean at the photo, then obviously make sure that you're using the right duvets. And although they are white, it does not mean that they all have to be like completely straight. They can have some form of texture to them, and sometimes it's even better, right? Because by having a texture to the actual duvet, you're eliminating the factor of ironing, which obviously is something you'll have to pay extra for if you deal with your cleaners, of course. And if you do it yourself, even if you did your cleaning yourself, then it's going to be your time to iron all the sets. And for this reason, if you have something with a texture, then of course you can save yourself a lot of money or time depending on who's doing that washing for you. Number four is decorating. So have a think about how you're going to just stage the entire property in terms of like a decor. So you can implement things like pictures, canvas. Obviously, it all has to fit in nicely, unless your theme will be that everything will be like completely random. That's also an interesting theme, right? Plants are essential in order to revive the interior, right? So it does not have to be a live plant. You can obviously source artificial plants. I'm using a lot of artificial ones because obviously it's going to be hard to maintain and water the plants or provide some form of nutrition to the plants and clean after the plants, obviously, dropping leaves and all that. So for many reasons, artificial plants of high quality are also like very highly desirable, and I recommend using plants to revive, like with standing trees or hanging plants. These are like really reviving the interiors. Next, we've got wall decor. So, things like clocks, like mirrors, things that can really just revive the interior, that can add the character to the interior. Of course, everything within the right taste and fitting in well with your theme. Next, we've got rugs and carpets, and I love them personally, especially in the areas where you're sitting, right? Where you're spending time on the sofa, for example, and you've got a nice little rug just under your feet. It just creates this nice and cozy character to the property, and it also looks very modern on photos if you select the right rug. And lamps, I love lamps to bits, like especially freestanding lamps. They add so much character, especially if they are like of the right style and of the right theme, matching our interior. Then lamps are also absolutely amazing, and they also add to our photo taking activity, which is something I want to cover right now. We get to this point where we have staged the property and now we need some good quality pictures in order to attract our bookings, right? So what we have to think about in the first place is whether we're going to source the pictures ourselves or whether we're going to hire somebody like a professional photographer who's going to do it for us. Typically in Midlands area in the UK, for a good quality photo session of your property, depending on whether that's going to be 2-bedroom property, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, obviously that price will fluctuate. But typically, I would say the fair price would be somewhere between 100 and 150 pounds, going maybe up to 200, like a maximum price for your photo session of the property. If you, however, decided that it's your first property, for example, you don't want to spend that money, you're trying to save as much as possible, then of course you can take photos yourself. And here are some pointers for you on how to take good high quality photos so that you don't have to spend extra money on a professional photographer in the first place. First of all, and the most important probably, is use high quality camera. So if you've got DSLR camera, that's great. Utilize that for your photo taking. That's what I did in the past. But if you haven't got DSLR, you can either ask somebody who has and borrow that camera from them, or if not, then you can use a phone camera, but make sure that it's going to be something of high quality. It's not going to be something like, I don't know, some old phone like Nokia, for example, old Nokia, right? That barely just captured the photo or the image. Make sure that you're using high quality camera in your iPhone, for example, iPhone 15 or iPhone 14, or maybe like the latest Samsung. The new phones, they typically have got great lens, and make sure that you're going to be using the high resolution mode at your phone or in your DSLR in order to make sure that you capture the lights, capture the colors, and it's going to be crystal clear photo. Next, make sure that you've got plenty of light. Remember when I said just a second ago that we need lamps. Lamps are typically great because at the photos, your role is to turn on all the lights possible. So whether that will be your ceiling lamp or whether that's going to be your freestanding lamp, maybe like a bit of a side table lamp, no matter what that is, make sure that all the lights that you've got inside, they are turned on for your photo shooting, because they add the character, they add the glance and the shininess to the photos, and it just all looks nice and modern. I really love the interiors with spotlights, for example, where you've got all the spotlights on. It just creates this wow effect, and I really love it. Next, we've got height of the photos. So make sure that you're going to be taking photos from the right height. And typically what's recommended is 1 meter to 1.2 meters. So you can tell that the photos are not best taken if somebody is taking photo, for example, from very high up, right? And they try to just sort of capture the entire room. Instead, what we try to do, we just try to do it from the level of 1 meter, so it captures the entire interior in a nice and modern way. So if you position the camera in the right angle and the right height, it will certainly capture the character, the right width, the right height of the room or of the interior, and it will be a very nice and successful photo. If you can use tripods, that's great, because obviously you can just have the device standing in the middle, and it's going to be nicely sort of capturing. There's not going to be any movement, any motion. There's not going to be any blur on the photo. So if you can find a tripod, then use a tripod. And then remember that you always take photos in a horizontal orientation if possible, unless you're taking photo of something like en suite or something that's very narrow. Then it will be hard to grab a photo with a horizontal mode, but try, at least try. If you can capture it in a horizontal mode, that's great, because typically horizontal photos are just looking more professional. They are more for like photo sharing on OTAs, whereas if you've got the vertical photos, they typically are good for like social media, for your reels, for your stories. And we're not trying to create a story here, we're trying to create a nice professional ad for our property. Last but not least, make sure that you capture interesting features. You know, sometimes when you go to OTAs and you've got a nice room with, for example, a very quirky lamp, or maybe a very interesting duvet set with some towels sort of on top of things. So there is like a specific focus on that photo just to capture the bed, the duvet, and some towels, for example. And it just gives that nice taste of modern or characteristic design that is all capturing the interior of it. It's not that every single photo has to be capturing just the width of the room, like the entire room. You can capture small features, maybe even like a bowl of fruits, for example, or maybe like very interesting freestanding lamp. You can do that if you put the things in the right angle. Then this will obviously add more character to the property for somebody who is viewing photos and making a decision whether or not they are going to book your property. And now you need to go live because your property is fully staged, you're happy with the decor, you've got the photos taken. So now you need to start advertising, because otherwise, without the right marketing, we won't generate guests, and guests will not be able to pay us, which would be a bit of a shame, right? We're doing this, of course, for a bit of a profit, right? So let me tell you about how to go live with your property. In the first place, you have to decide whether you're going to be using a property manager, or if not, then whether you're going to be using a channel manager. Property manager is somebody who's going to be managing your property, right? As we discussed earlier when we were doing due diligence, we can contact some property managers or service accommodation managers in the area who will be doing all the management work for us. So that's one thing that you can do. If you don't want to go down that route, then you can obviously look at the channel manager. And channel manager is a piece of software that you have to pay for, obviously, on a monthly subscription basis. But this, in essence, will allow you to connect multiple different channels and manage them from one place. So, for example, one channel would be Airbnb, one channel would be booking.com, one channel would be Verbo, one channel would be, for example, Expedia. If you want to connect everything and have everything in one place, then you would be typically using a channel manager. A channel manager is also ensuring that when you've got a booking coming from booking.com, for example, automatically other channels will be updated for those dates, so you don't create double bookings. Believe me, double booking is a nightmare, because when somebody books in the same date, then it's your responsibility to cancel this booking. Of course, there is a bit of a process for it. If you want to avoid the cost, then you have to come up with a reason why you cannot accommodate this booking. So it can be a bit of a painful process, and for this reason, I would say try to eliminate as much as possible double bookings, and channel manager will certainly help you with that. It's definitely a very good solution if you don't want to pay hundreds of pounds every single month for a property manager, and instead you're okay to spend 50, 60, 40 pounds a month in order to have this channel manager in place. And obviously there are different channel managers. There is my favorite one, which is, I think, Uplisting. There is Avivo. There is Host Away. There are so many of them that if you type in right now on Google channel manager service accommodation or just channel manager, there will be so many different options, and they do provide different level of services at different level of price. So make sure that when you go, you just choose something that's going to fit within your budget, but also make sure that you will check some reviews, because I also used some bad ones in the past that I would never go back to, but I also used some good ones that helped me a lot with my business. And for this reason, I'll leave it up to you to choose the right channel manager for your business if you are going down that avenue. Okay. So, in the first place, if you decided that you want to do it all yourself, let's say this is your first property and you're trying to avoid that cost, then absolutely you can do it all by yourself. In the first place, we've got Airbnb. We all know Airbnb. Your property has to be on Airbnb. I love Airbnb. It's nice, simple to set up the ad with Airbnb. It takes literally like 10-15 minutes. It's no complex at all. Next, we've got booking.com. And as mentioned before, booking.com is that big platform with probably the biggest budget for marketing. So we cannot forget about booking.com, although interface of booking.com is not as friendly. And for many reasons, I don't like using booking.com, but I have to. But like we all have to use it. However, if you're using Channel Manager, that will be controlling everything from one place, then a lot of interaction between you and booking.com will be eliminated because you're going to be managing everything from your channel manager software. So that's something to take into account as well. We've got Verbo, and Verbo is really like very fast growing platform that becomes more and more popular in the UK. I think it's also very popular in the US, for example. So if you want to grow and scale your service accommodation business, Verbo is definitely one of those things that you have to implement. Google Hotels, it's another one that you can very easily set up. And again, most channel managers will also allow you to connect with this particular channel. And we also have Expedia. I think we all know Expedia. And there are so many more that I'm not listing here. But the critical point to understand here is that if you are on Airbnb, if you're on booking.com, you're on Verbo, on those three, then you will obviously start generating a lot of bookings just from that. The next level for you would be the channel manager or property manager in order to get your property listed on different portals as well, so that you can maximize your occupancy at your property. And of course, we cannot forget about portals like Comfy Workers. This is where people typically look for long-term stays. It works in a slightly different way where we advertise our property. There will be people looking specifically for property in your area, and they just specify the requirements. Once Comfy Workers receive their requirements, you'll receive an email that there is an interested person in your property and you have to make an offer. So then you have to go back to Comfy Workers, see what they're looking for, what the budget is, what the location requirement is, and then you have to make your offer on your property. So if they are looking for something, typically, I don't know, sometimes they look for like a year or 6 months, then of course you just need to take into account your costs and everything else, including. So it all makes financial sense for you. And remember that Comfy Workers also take their commission for that service. So that's something that you have to take into account. But remember that if it works through Comfy Workers, then automatically you're not paying a commission to booking.com or Airbnb. One way or another, you will pay the commission. The question is who will take the commission, right? Next one, of course, we already touched based on Housing Anywhere. So make sure that you are on Housing Anywhere as well. There is not a lot of competition, and sometimes people are looking on Housing Anywhere. Just make sure that you set everything right in the first place, that you meet the regulations in order to list your property. Once you do, hopefully, fingers crossed, there will be some inquiries coming from housinganywhere.com as well, that it generates long-term bookings as well. Don't forget about Facebook though. Again, Facebook groups, even your personal profile. If you list that property every now and again and just refresh people, then sometimes they might just come across this and they will find, oh, I actually need to stay in this area. And they might just contact you and you can just generate a nice booking just from Facebook. And that would be actually a direct booking because it's generated straight to you without any other channels, and for that reason, of course, a lot more profit will stay in your pocket. I think this is something that you would like to see, right? And that brings me to another subject, which is direct bookings. I don't want to elaborate too much on it, but I think every service accommodation business should be going towards direct bookings, because when we generate more direct bookings, ultimately it means that we're not going to be paying the commission. We're going to be obviously better at revenue, and it will help us with growing our brand as well. And typically, when you start, it's hard to generate direct bookings straight away. But ideally, you want to grow your brand, generate some leaflets, generate some business cards. People who are staying at your property, they can perhaps find some more details, and when they are staying at the property, they can just take something with them. So when they want to book again in your area, they can just scan a quick QR code, for example, and they can go directly to your website where you can just generate direct bookings, or they can just contact you direct and you can just source it for them just through a normal conversation process, right? So one way or another, think about how you're going to be managing and generating direct bookings, because they just mean more profit to you. And ideally, you want to have those returning clients back to you because they were so happy about staying at your property the first time they came around. There are many, many more different portals, different channels that you can absolutely utilize. So I would say, if you really want to be everywhere and you want to maximize your revenue, then I would strongly suggest use the channel manager. With your first property, it's not essential, but when you start scaling and growing to like 2 properties, 3 and 4, and so on and so on, then you definitely want to use the channel manager, especially that it will really, really, really help you with avoiding the double bookings, which certainly you don't want in your business. And at that point, maybe you might start thinking about either hiring a property management company, or maybe you're going to start your own. Who knows? One way or another, this business is growing and it gives you even more opportunity. So I hope you're getting excited about it, because rent to service accommodation is a fantastic business model. And if you manage it rightly, it can be very, very lucrative and very, very exciting at the same time. Hey, at this point, I want to tell you that we've covered so much, and service accommodation is a very complex strategy. So I want to be transparent with you from the very first moment that this is not an easy peasy strategy. This is more complex, this is more advanced, but you're learning this stuff. So hopefully, when you master those skills, when you master this knowledge, and you start implementing step by step as you go with your first property, then the level of your overwhelm will be much less, because now you know what you're doing, and don't be afraid to actually do it, because at least you know how you've got it. So just make sure that you follow it, make sure that you implement it, and you're going to be fine. But on the flip side, I want to tell you this is not the end of things, because we're looking to set up a successful and lucrative rent to rent business operating service accommodation, flats, apartments, houses, of course. But the whole purpose of it is that we get a lot more money and a lot more time. You have to decide how much you want to be involved. And typically, new startups want to be more involved. They want to get their hands dirty because they also want to learn the business. They want to save some money up front. And there's nothing wrong with it. But the long-term plan should be that you're going to be like taking a step back from the business, because there are many, many activities that other people can do for you, and there are different systems you can implement that will be doing a lot of work for you. All the heavy lifting will be taken off your shoulders, and you're going to gain much more time, so you can then utilize that time on either scaling up the business, adding more properties to your portfolio, or maybe you will want to enjoy that time with your family, your friends, maybe holidays. If you systemize your service accommodation business as well, then this should give you enough freedom to travel around, and you will be able to coordinate the entire business from being, let's say, on Ibiza or in Spain or Italy, wherever you go. So systemization is a very important step in order to give your time back, and you can then start doing and enjoying your life and doing other things that you want to do. So thing number one I want you to take away from this module, from systemization module, is that have that in the back of your mind that this should be your priority, that you want to take a step back. You don't want to be doing all the things yourself, because otherwise you'll get yourself trapped in the business and you're going to struggle to take a step back, because you're going to be almost like imprisoned into your day-to-day stuff, and you don't want to be doing that. So in the first place, we need to define your system. Have a think whether you're going to be using a channel manager, whether you're going to be using a property manager, like Serviced Accommodation Manager, for example, or even at the beginning of your business, whether that will be Excel spreadsheet. This is where you want to manage all your bookings. This is where you want to manage all your check-ins and check-outs. And pretty much this will be your core system. This is the database of your operational business, right? Of your service accommodation apartment. So be clear on how you're going to be managing those things. Nothing wrong with using Excel spreadsheet. The problem is that once you start adding more properties, then it's going to become a pain in the neck side, definitely, to manage everything from one Excel spreadsheet. And ultimately, the natural way and progress forward would be to go to a channel manager or use the property manager instead. Next, you want to synchronize your calendars. So remember when we said that there's going to be a long process. Unfortunately, those things do happen sometimes, and it's a pain in the backside to sort out double bookings. And for this reason, you need to make sure that your calendars are synchronized. If you're using 3 calendars, for example, on booking.com, on Airbnb, and on Verbo, then make sure you synchronize those calendars, because otherwise you will have the situations where you're going to get double bookings, because obviously at some point in your day you have to also sleep. You won't be able to manage the business 24/7. You don't want to be in that situation when you wake up and you see that you've got a booking from booking.com and Verbo at the same time, because then you will have to cancel one of them, and that is not only a painful and stressful process, but this can also lead to some financial losses, because you'll have to reimburse some people money for your cancellation, of course. Next step of your systemization will be a dynamic pricing. Dynamic pricing is a piece of software that allows to intelligently control the pricing in your area. So let's say that you've got a property in Leeds, and for example, there is a one specific date or weekend, for example, where every year something is happening, and for this reason all the service accommodation apartments in the area are lifting up their prices. You of course want to be on top of those things as well, so you can either control that yourself, but dynamic pricing is taking into account a lot of different factors, and it automatically connects to your calendars, and it controls the price per night depending on the time of the season, whether that's a peak season, whether it's a slow, cold season, for example, whether there are some events going on. So for a long time, I didn't use dynamic pricing to begin with. And I found that right now I'm using dynamic pricing software, and I realize how much profit I left on the table because my rate was relatively flat. And dynamic pricing is just fluctuating, of course, between weekends, events, and stuff. So I really realized how much profit I actually left on the table. But this is, of course, a learning curve, and there was not a lot of information available for me at that time to start using dynamic pricing. So here you go. You've got that information available now. The most popular is probably Price Labs, but there are many others. I'm using Beyond personally, and I love Beyond. My clients are also using Beyond. So it helps you to control the nightly rates, and then it will help you to maximize your profits. Next is automated messaging. So when it comes to people booking in your property, from the first moment, you need to be in a communication with them. So the first message should be something like, thank you very much for booking. Here are some initial information. Then on the day or the day before they check in, they need to have some checking instructions and details about how they will get access to the property. Ideally, you want to systemize the access to the property as well. You don't want to be there when every single guest is arriving. You stand there with the keys, because obviously that's a lot of your time taken away. Instead, you want to have a system. Instead, you want to have maybe a key lock, or maybe like a digital padlock, or anything that will eliminate you from the equation, so the guest can actually arrive, they can get their access, and they can get into the apartment or a house without you being involved. So have a think about how you're going to do it. And that information should be clearly messaged throughout the messaging services on booking.com, Airbnb, or if it's a direct booking, then obviously for a direct messaging. But make sure that your messaging is capturing all the details, checking in, checking out, operational stuff. It all should be captured in the automated messaging, and you don't have to send those messages on your own. the OTA should be sending that at set time. So when you say first message should be sent straight after the booking, the next message, like check-in for example, should be sent 24 hours before the checking in. And then the checkout message should be sent 24 hours before they check out. Make sure that you capture all that information so you minimize the messages coming from the guests asking, how do I get into the apartment? How do I do this? How do I do that? Because otherwise you're going to be spending tons of your time just on messages and replying to people, which over time can be really frustrating because it will be naturally eating away the time from your schedule and your diary, and ultimately you cannot scale your business. Moving forward, let's focus on Power Team for a second. How important Power Team is, I cannot stress this enough. Power Team is the team of your people, contractors who will be working with you, for you, however you want to frame it. The most important Power Team member would be your cleaner, in my opinion. And you want to work with cleaners who are prepared to do anything they have to do in order to run the apartment successfully. When I say this, I don't just mean just a good quality clean, but when we have to do a bit of shopping or we need to do a bit of linen, maybe they can do linen for you. Or maybe if there was a critical problem that somebody just has to go to the property, maybe because the lock is like not working and the cleaner, for example, has got a spare set of keys, then they can go to the property. There are the people who you can count on in the first place. And even if something is not working, for example, light is not working, they obviously will be the first protocol of action. They're the first point of contact that they will say, okay, this light is not working. They can contact you, and maybe even they can just replace the bulb because it's such a simple thing to do, right? So make sure that your cleaners are like your cleaners on steroids, hopefully, not just a traditional cleaner who will just go in, clean and go out and they're not interested in anything else. Make sure that your cleaners will be also working with you and they will be part of your team really and they'll feel it. Of course, on top of that, make sure that you've got your maintenance team. Handyman, very, very precious asset, but also people like electricians, like plumbers, people who, if something goes wrong, for example, there is a blocked drain, you have the contact at your hand so you can send them and ideally they can react straight away. Sometimes it will be an emergency call out charge, but that's absolutely fine because what you don't want to do is you don't want to receive a report of something not working and then you not reacting to it because it will affect your reply rate, it will affect your reviews, it will affect your overall quality, and it's not going to be the way to run your business. So you don't want to wait until something happens. Ideally, you want to have those people waiting and you're going to have them in your team. So when you ring them, you can rely on them. Essentially, you can rely on them. And I love to have at least two of each type of contractor in my power team. So let's say I've got a plumber that I'm using as a primary resource, but then if they are not available, maybe they're on holiday, then I've got a secondary option as well. Same thing is for the plumbers, for example. I've got two options. Same thing is for the cleaners. I've got my preferred cleaner, but if one cleaner didn't work out or they couldn't attend the property on one specific date, then I've got a secondary cleaner who also knows the property. So be smart and clever about building your power team and build the power team essentially from the very beginning. The quicker you do it, the quicker you can systemize the property fully, and then you can take a step back and then you can focus either on building or scaling or enjoying time on things that you really want to focus on. But power team and resources are essential. Like they are like you cannot replace them. It is like non-negotiable step. You have to make sure you've got a good power team. They understand what your business model is and they will follow your lead. Next, we've got linen. So linen can be very much connected to the cleaner. Most cleaners these days provide the linen service. So they will, of course, clean the linen. And when they come back to the property, they will dress the beds and everything. So ideally, you want to have a cleaner who will do all this for you. But if not, then you can also tie up with companies that are renting linen that perhaps you don't want to spend that money up front and you prefer to rent it and add this to your monthly bill, which is absolutely fine. You can also do that. You have to define that again from the very beginning, how you're going to manage the linen and how you're going to marry up your cleaners with the linen if this is not like done by cleaners all in one go. But the easiest and the fastest way to do it is to have 3 sets of linen and then cleaners will be picking it up, they will be washing it, they'll obviously come back to the property and dress it all up for you. Make sure that when you take on new cleaners and they are happy to do the linen, you very clearly determine and specify what will be their charge for the additional service. Of course, linen is additional service, so they might just say, you know, just cleaning will be £60, but including linen, it will be £80, for example. So make sure that everything is clearly specified and defined, because if you don't do it upfront, sometimes it can lead to some nasty situations in the future. So make sure that everything is nicely determined from day one. Then think about your supply chain. I already mentioned that ideally you want to have cleaners that you can rely on day in, day out. And if there is missing fork, if there is a missing glass, if there is a missing chemical, for example, like, I don't know, dishwasher tablets, for example, then your power team, with your permission, they can just go and buy things. That's certainly how I do things, that if there is a smaller bill up to like 20, 30 pounds, then the cleaner can just go to the store and buy it. They will just send me the receipt, and that's absolutely fine. So you need to make sure that you've got your supply chain set as well, and ideally your cleaners will be providing things that are like running low or things that are missing. They obviously need to understand, and you need to give them like clear disposition that you also expect them to do it as well. Unless you don't want to do it and you want to be in control of all the consumables and you're going to be controlling the supply chain, they just need to tell you that something is running low. You have to either order it or you have to provide that to the property. It's entirely up to you. But remember that my aim and my take on running a successful rent-to-SA business is when we actually take a step out and back. So ideally you want to have cleaners who you can trust, and of course control the spend, and on a regular basis just make sure that all the supplies are at the property, that you don't run out, and that will lead to a successful, good, well systemized rent-to-rent business. Next, we've got a welcome pack. Welcome pack is a great tool. I found it really, really helpful for guests who are arriving at the property, who are obviously just dropping the bags, undressing maybe, like dropping the coats, shoes, etc. And the first thing when they walk into the living room, for example, on a coffee table or somewhere at the nice located point of view, they have a welcome pack. So this is like essentially a book that you created for them, right? A list of things that could be of their interest when they arrive. So first of all, it will be like, welcome to the property. You know, feel free to use the bottles of water that we left for you in front of you. And here are some instructions for you. So in the first place, this is the instruction on how to check in. This is the instruction on how to check out. This is how you manage your rubbish. This is what you need to do if you would like to smoke a cigarette, for example. This is what you have to do if you want to turn on the heating. So welcome pack is essentially a pack of information of operational stuff that when somebody arrives at the property, they've got everything in one place. So if they want to find, for example, a Wi-Fi password, it's going to be also in a welcome pack. And in your first message or second message, check-in message, you can just say that for more information about how to operate and how to make yourself at home at the property, always refer to welcome pack, because all the operational stuff will be included in the welcome pack. And then you see how everything just ties up nicely. It all makes like one logical sense. So when you do all this, people will not be messaging you all the time. And trust me, you don't want people messaging you all the time, because obviously they don't want to do that if they don't have to. You don't want to be receiving messages, especially when you've got multiple properties. And instead, if you can just put that all information into one pack, everyone will just be happy. They will just see that you're well prepared for that, and they will naturally want to stay in property that is essentially welcoming them, right? Next, we've got other instructions. So welcome pack is great for general stuff, but there are sometimes things that require a little bit more detail, and that wouldn't be suitable for a welcome pack. And I tend to use instructions, for example, for how to do the hot water or how to do the heating. This is like additional piece of information that I can print out, maybe with some pictures, and I can do maybe like a step-by-step thing on how to, for example, add some more water to the water tank. In one property, we've got a water tank that is a bit of a complex system. So we created like a step-by-step instruction for them on what they need to do in order to add more hot water into the water tank in case the hot water just ran out from the tank, right? So it's there. And again, in welcome pack, it just says that if you need to add more water, there is an instruction by the boiler. Please head over to the boiler for further instruction. And then there is that instruction explaining how to do it. The more instructions you actually put out, the better, because again, it proves that you're well prepared. They have all the information for you. But even if they cannot cope with it, always at the end just include, if you still have any questions, just message us on this and this number, WhatsApp us, and that will just eliminate any confusion of their mind as well. I love videos. I cannot say, I love videos, and I know other people love videos as well. And that's what I like to create for example, checking instruction. Of course, there is a written checking instruction in the message they receive 24 hours before they arrive, for example. But there could also be a video uploaded on YouTube or anywhere you want to upload it. And there could be a link attached to the welcome message, for example. And when they click on that link, they can clearly see on a video how to get inside the property. Because some people prefer text, but some people prefer visuals. Some people prefer pictures, they prefer videos. If you can provide them with either a video and a text, that is amazing. People will love it. People will appreciate the fact that everything is captured. And even if they still message you saying that, oh, we don't know how to get in, then you've got a point of reference. You can say, have you read the description and have you seen the video? And typically, if they have, they wouldn't even message you. But because they do message you, it just means that they perhaps skipped this message, or they didn't see it, or maybe they forgot. So instead of trying to explain them how to get in, you can just say, go back to this message, click the link, and the video will clearly tell you how you can get inside the property. How genius that is, I cannot stress this enough. And it doesn't have to be about checking, by the way. It can also be about anything around the property, especially if you think that it's a little bit more complex. When you think that video will be helpful for them, then absolutely create that video. It's going to take you it's a one-off, it's going to take you some time, but once you upload it, you can just share that link and people will just use it and use it and use it, and it will again systemize. People won't contact you as often, and that's where you want to be. And last but not least, we've got concierge. It's something that I've introduced a long time ago, and I have to say it works really, really well. So I tend to put that somewhere around the property. It could be in the picture frames, it could be right next to the welcome pack, or it could be even included in the welcome pack. It's essentially the information that will help people to operate not just in the property, but around the property. So for example, the favorite bars, what are the favorite restaurants locally, what are the points of activity. For example, maybe there is a water park, or maybe there is a leisure park, or there is a big shopping center. So you can just say what's happening in the area, and on top of that you can provide some handy phone numbers. For example, the preferred taxi driver, or what to do in terms of if the electricity went out, the general number. There are so many different things that you can put around the concierge, of course, but it's mainly about what's happening outside of the property. So points of interest, taxi drivers, anything that you might think about can go into your concierge that will help people to move around outside of the property as well. Very, very helpful, very, very handy, and very, very professional. And people again appreciate when that information is available for them. When they arrive, they can sit down, they can read, and they can say, I need actually a taxi driver. So instead of looking up, they have that information in front of them. So happy days. I think we've captured everything with the systemization. My recommendation here is implement all of this as soon as possible, especially the documentation side of things and the automated messages. Make sure that you've got this essentially from day one when people start booking your property, because it will eliminate a lot of the hassle and the messages. And trust me, you don't want to do that, but also your guests don't want to do that. If they don't have clear information in front of them, they can really, really easily pick it up. And people love to pick up things that they can complain about. So you don't want to give people reasons to complain about when it comes to the reviews. And now, actually, I want to go to the phase and the stage where we're going to be talking about reviews and how important they actually are in your service accommodation business. We all buy every single day, right? We all make buying decisions based on reviews. We live in a world where we always we check the reviews, we check the feedback before we go and buy from somebody who you don't know, right? And it works exactly the same way with your serviced accommodation apartment. When people go to property through Airbnb or booking.com, they'll find the listing in the first place, they'll read the description, and most of those people will definitely check the reviews. They'll check the rating. If the rating is high, if the rating is low, what typically people have got to say about this property, because they already stayed there. So people will rely on people's reviews. Your job is to do everything possible in this world in order to satisfy your guests, because then you can ask them politely to leave a review. And once they do, it will be a natural marketing and promotion for your property for future guests at your house. And for this reason, I urge you, when people arrive, always be spot on and accurate with your description. So if the property says something in the description, make sure that you also deliver it. But not only that, you will also be over delivering as well. So, for example, description could be saying that the property is extremely clean and so on and so on. This will be provided. But on top of that, there could be a bottle of wine, or there could be like 2 bottles of water, for example, and maybe a bucket of flowers, something that nobody expected in the first place, but you are doing something extra. And trust me, those little moves, those little gestures, people will appreciate, and they will highlight that in reviews. On the flip side, we have to be careful, because very often people like to find something negative, and it's so much easier naturally for people to say something about the negative stuff rather than the positive stuff. So eliminate the flaws, eliminate the mistakes that you can make, right? Make sure that everything is as per the property description. On the flip side, give people even more than what they expect when they first arrive at your property. Also, be great at communication. When people write to you, do not let them wait. Ideally within 1 hour, you can reply to their message and they will get what they want. Typically, those messages are very easy to solve. Like, there could be a bit of a question about how to do this, how to do that, and you can really quickly reply to them. But those things do matter, and they will ultimately impact your review rates. And now I want to touch base a bit more about how to manage your reviews and how to utilize them so it allows other people for future bookings to make a good decision that they want to stay at your property. Firstly, think about how you're going to be asking for your reviews. Of course, you can do that automatically through one of those messages that you're going to be setting up for all your guests. So it could be like in your checkout message that could be sent, for example, 24 hours before they check out. There could be also a one sentence about their stay, asking if everything went well, and if you were so kind after the checkout, if they could go and leave a review, because it will help you massively. Or you could set a separate message just for that. Once they check out, maybe 24 hours after that, maybe 2 hours after that, you want to set up another message asking them if everything went well, and hopefully they can leave a positive review, which will obviously help your business to grow. Think about how you're going to master it, because every single guest that you're in touch with and who stays at your property should have the opportunity to leave a review, and it shouldn't be just a one-off message. Ideally, people would leave like a review after the first message, but we know that typically it doesn't happen, and you need to nurture them a little bit. So maybe there could be like a follow-up email or a follow-up text message or a follow-up WhatsApp message after this, asking them for a review, because those reviews will be naturally propelling your business moving forward. So ask them for this several times, and if they really loved to stay at your property, perhaps they just forgot, they had something more important to do. At the end of the day, they are coming back perhaps from a long journey, and leaving a review at that point is not the priority right now. But 1 day later or 2 days later, when they go back, when they get back, they settle, they can leave a positive review. So make sure that you just remind them very, very kindly, very, very politely, and have a system that will ultimately do this for you, and not that you have to manually message every single person, because at some point you will start forgetting those messages and you will naturally start losing more and more reviews. And once you do it, why not to invite them back at your property? Because if they come back to the city, to the town, and they love your property, then why not to stay at the same property? They already know it, right? Provide them with some sort of incentive as well. Say to them that we would love to see you again and welcome you back at our property. And if you do come back, you can contact us directly on such and such number. And if you do come back to us, then we would love to treat you with a nice loyalty discount. And if you do it, then you can attract those direct bookings to you. Of course, you will not be paying the OTA fees because it's directly to you. And therefore, even if you give them a little bit of a discount, it could still be more profitable to you because the discount will be, for example, less than the OTA's commission, right? So that can also be incorporated in your messages after their stay. Incentivize them to stay at your property and maybe even do like a little bit of a recommendation scheme. So if they, for example, recommend your property to somebody else and they stay at your property, then you can incentivize your guests for recommending your property. So have a think what you can put in place in order to attract more and more bookings from people who already stayed at your property. Now, of course, it's a business, you're running service accommodation apartment, you've got cleaners involved, etc. So there could be situations where you'll have to handle challenging situations. For example, there could be a blocked system drainage, or there could be like a power cut. In those situations, you have to make sure that you are available for receiving those messages, or you've got somebody who's going to be receiving those messages. And if that happens, you want to be ready and have systems in place in order to handle those situations. Like we said, if we've got the right number of contractors who are working with us, then you can really quickly handle that situation. The priority here is that you listen to your guest and then you react to it very, very quickly. If you don't, then unfortunately, this will cause a lot of negative comments. As I said, people love to pick up on negative stuff, so they will not write about the positive stuff. They'll just write about the one negative thing that happened to you. But trust me, if you react quickly to those requests and you can really fix things very, very quickly, not only it will very often satisfy the guest, and it will also be you can turn that into a win and ask them for a positive review. And in that positive review, they can also say that there was a breakdown, which obviously do happen. It's a property business, so in properties we do get breakdowns, and we all know that. It's all about how you react and how you manage the actual breakdown. I had a lot of guests who were positively satisfied with the time of reaction that it took us in order to rectify the problem, and we actually turned them into a positive review. So have a think about what you can do in order to make your guests happy, including things that could go wrong as well. And going back to our reviews, I want to mention that you can also put in some things in your property in order to attract those reviews and more bookings. My favorite way of doing it is by printing out or designing and printing out leaflets or business cards, something that you can leave at the property that could be there just standing on the coffee table or maybe on the cupboard, somewhere when they can see it, and they can very easily take it with them when they leave. So it could be like a business card, for example, specifying your brand, specifying your contact details, maybe providing a QR code for your direct booking website, or if not, a QR code to contact you directly on WhatsApp. And when they want to book again, they can very quickly just pull this out, they can scan it, and they can contact you. So you're making it easy for them as well. And you also allow them not to forget about your property, because typically when people do take this leaflet or this business card, then naturally it will just go through their hands again and again, right? So they will remember their stay and your property because they took this business card. So if you provide this naturally will also attract more bookings from the same guests, or maybe they will be able to recommend it to somebody else. And then on top of that, it can also provide them with another link maybe to leave a review for their stay. So make sure that you give them as many ways so that they can memorize your property, memorize their stay, and you can even provide them with something physical so they can always go back to. And business cards, I found, are one of the best and my favorite methods to make a footprint in their memory. at some point, by following through consequently about those reviews, you will build a nice list of different reviews of people who stayed at your property. And this is something that you naturally want to use for promotion of your business as well. So utilize your social media and obviously at that point grow your brand, because when you grow reviews you should also grow your brand. You should have maybe a little name for your properties at that point. Maybe you want to have towels with engraved or maybe imprinted name of your brand. Maybe it's just about the color scheme for your brand. Maybe that color scheme could also be on the photos and canvas at the property. Again, imagination should not block you in any way, shape or form. The more you systemize and the more you sort of put a brand behind you, and you will have more reviews and more testimonials of people who stayed at your property, the more it will be attractive to people. So be vocal about it, because now you've built a nice brand and you're getting satisfied clients, satisfied guests. So post it everywhere you can on your social media platforms, on Facebook groups, on LinkedIn, on TikTok. Be vocal about it. Go everywhere you can, really, and speak about it proudly, because now you've got a portfolio of properties and people are very happy to stay there. And if you proudly present it to other people, guess what? It will attract even more stays. So that's the power of reviews. That's the power of branding. Never underestimate it. Have systems in place to acquire those reviews and then be vocal about them and have an idea about how to market those reviews in order to reach as many people as possible and to promote your business. At this point, I think I gave you pretty much everything I've got about rent to rent, about how to start a rent to rent business, what it actually is, about HMOs. This video was specifically about service accommodation. I gave you many hours of content that typically people would have to pay thousands of pounds or dollars in order to acquire this knowledge. Again, I've done it completely free of charge, because I really want as many people as possible to utilize this knowledge and to really break out from the system that we are facing every single day. Now you've got the knowledge. So if you still dream about a better life, you now have the tools in order to implement this into your life. It's up to you whether you're going to change your reality or not. But as you know, I want to make it even easier for you to move forward. And for this reason, I created this 30-day challenge I spoke about multiple times during this video or the previous video. But I want to remind you that this 30-day challenge is still available. You can just go to the description and click on it, and you will get access to a coaching program with myself. And for the next 30 days, I'm going to be meeting you every single week for 4 weeks. And on top of that, I'm going to have a one-to-one session with you in order to build an outline, a blueprint specifically for your rent-to-rent business, so we know exactly what to do starting from tomorrow every single day, so you know you're just taking money-making activities and it will work exactly perfectly well for your situation, for your circumstances in your specific area, with your budget and your time, and so on and so on. And on top of that, remember, I'm providing so many different tools that will be handy to you, like HMO calculator, service accommodation calculator. I'll help you to create a script that will be created for you and just for you. And on top of that, a time management tool, which will help us to focus on things that only matter to your business and will push you towards your direction and your goals every single day. And remember, on top of that, we're going to be meeting weekly for the next 4 weeks. So the aim is that within the next 30 days, I'm going to turn you into a rent-to-rent machine, booking minimum 8 pre-qualified viewings in a single month, because that's where we want to be in order to be able to secure minimum 1 property a month or 1 property every 2 months. That's where I want you to be. It's up to you. It's your decision. I cannot make that decision for you. I already made my decision and I already made my money in rent-to-rent, and I'm still making that money. So now it's entirely up to you, and now the life is putting you at this path where you just have to decide whether you want to do something more in your life or whether you're comfortable where you are. Even if you have this knowledge, remember, and you don't do anything about it, you'll not get anywhere. So please be wise about making that decision. And on top of that, remember that in the description you will also find another link with a checklist of where your business is in terms of whether your business is ready to start monetizing in rent to rent. There are 10 questions, so make sure that you download it. It's completely free of charge. It will allow you to establish whether you're completely ready or there is still something missing in the whole puzzle in order for you to start monetizing on the rent to rent. I made a big sacrifice. It took me a long time in order to record this video. So at this point, I would love to ask a favor from you. If you could share love, if you want to share this video or the whole series of the video, I would love to see more people joining this video, watching this and being able to make an informed decision whether rent to rent is for them and whether they want to change their life through this strategy. So I would kindly ask you if you could share the love, split the message, share this with other people, friends. Of course, save this to your bookmarks because this knowledge, it will naturally slip away. You can always go back to it and revisit those videos if you want to check if something is not missing in your knowledge or perhaps you just forgot about one specific thing. So make sure that you add this to your bookmarks, share this with other people, and I would love to see you in a 30-day challenge. I cannot wait to see you in a 30-day challenge, and just go down there in the description. There is that link. So make sure you click on it, join the 30-day challenge, very, very tiny fee. And I cannot wait to welcome you and meeting you on a one-to-one meeting called a blueprint session. So with this all in mind, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week, day, month, year, and the rest of your life. And rent to rent, I hope, will play a big significant part in it. So I cannot wait to see you at the 30-day challenge. Until next time and until the next video, take care, be blessed.